In the vast expanses of Montana's Bridger Valley, where the wind carries whispers of wild spirits, a single moment of compassion sparked a chain of events that would challenge an entire community to redefine what it means to protect the vulnerable. This is the story of an abandoned pregnant Mustang, a 7-year-old girl named Lily, and how their paths crossed during a summer storm that changed everything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The summer heat had been relentless across Bridger Valley for weeks, baking the typically lush Montana landscape into a golden tapestry of sun-scorched grasslands and dusty trails. But on that fateful evening in mid-July, the atmosphere shifted dramatically as dark clouds gathered on the horizon, promising relief that the parched earth had been desperately awaiting. The Parker family, Michael, Rebecca, and their 7-year-old daughter Lily, had moved to their modest ranch on the outskirts of White Ridge just 3 months prior. The transition from bustling Denver to rural Montana had been challenging, especially for young Lily, whose vibrant imagination and deep connection to animals had always been her defining qualities. The isolation of their new home had initially dampened her spirits, but the wide-open spaces and abundance of wildlife gradually rekindled her natural enthusiasm. That evening, as the first rumbles of thunder echoed across the valley, the Parkers settled into their cozy living room, the scent of Rebecca's homemade apple pie filling the air. Michael, a wildlife photographer who had taken the relocation as an opportunity to document Montana's diverse ecosystem, sat reviewing the day's shots while Rebecca graded papers for her online teaching position. Lily, with her copper-red hair falling in loose curls around her freckled face, pressed her nose against the window, watching with fascination as the storm approached. "Mom, look at how the lightning dances," Lily whispered, her breath fogging the glass. "It's like the sky is talking to us." Rebecca smiled at her daughter's poetic observation, about to respond when the first heavy raindrops began to hammer against the roof. Within minutes, the gentle shower transformed into a torrential downpour, with sheets of rain obscuring the view of their property beyond the front porch. The family's border collie, Scout, who had been dozing by the fireplace, suddenly lifted. His head, ears perked and alert. His unusual behavior caught Lily's attention immediately. "Scout hears something," she announced with the certainty only children possess. Michael lowered his camera. "It's just the storm, sweetie. Animals get nervous when—" But Scout was already on his feet, pacing anxiously between the window and the door, his normally playful demeanor replaced by agitation. A strange, high-pitched sound pierced through the cacophony of rain and thunder, faint, but distinct. "There!" Lily pointed toward the eastern boundary of their property, where an ancient oak tree stood silhouetted against the stormy sky. "I heard it too. Someone's out there, Daddy." Michael exchanged a concerned glance with Rebecca, who was already reaching for the flashlight they kept in the drawer of the side table. Years of living in rural areas had taught them to be prepared for anything, from power outages to injured wildlife wandering onto their land. "It's probably just a coyote caught in the storm," Michael reasoned, though he couldn't quite convince himself. The sound they'd heard didn't match the familiar calls of local wildlife. "No," Lily insisted, her green eyes wide with conviction. "It's someone who needs help. We have to go see." The determination in Lily's voice was something both parents recognized, the same unwavering resolve she'd shown when she'd found an abandoned barn owl with a broken wing last spring and refused to leave its side until wildlife services arrived. Her empathy for animals had always been remarkable, almost uncanny in its intensity. Rebecca handed Michael the flashlight and grabbed their heavy raincoats from the hook by the door. "We'll just check quickly," she conceded. "But you're staying." "Here, Lily." "But Mom," Lily protested. already struggling to pull on her yellow rubber boots. "I heard it first. Scout and I need to come." Another wail cut through the night, louder this time, carrying a note of desperation that made Scout bark sharply in response. The sound held such raw anguish that even Michael, who had encountered many injured animals in his photography career, felt a chill run down his spine. "Fine," he relented. "But you stay behind us, understand? And if we tell you to go back to the house, you do it immediately." Lily nodded solemnly, her small hand reaching down to reassure Scout, who pressed against her leg protectively. Armed with flashlights and wrapped in raincoats that immediately began to soak through, the Parker family stepped out into the fury of the storm. The wind howled around them, bending the tall prairie grass and whipping rain into their faces with stinging force. Michael took the lead, with Rebecca close behind and Lily carefully following, one hand gripping her mother's coat and the other buried in Scout's wet fur. They made their way toward the massive oak tree that marked the eastern edge of their property, where the land began to slope down toward a small seasonal creek, now swollen with rainwater. The beam of Michael's flashlight bounced erratically as he navigated the uneven terrain, casting ghostly shadows across the landscape. As they drew closer to the tree, Scout suddenly broke free from Lily's grip and bolted forward, barking frantically. "Scout, come back!" Michael called out, but the dog was already racing toward something huddled at the base of the oak. The flashlight beam finally settled on a sight that stopped all three Parkers in their tracks. Beneath the partial shelter of the ancient oak's canopy, a horse stood trembling, not just any horse, but a Mustang mare with a distinctive dun coat and dark mane plastered to her neck by the rain. Her sides were hollowed with hunger, yet her belly protruded unnaturally, indicating late-stage pregnancy. Most horrifying was the thick chain wrapped around her neck, secured to the tree with a heavy padlock. The metal had worn away the fur and cut into the flesh beneath, leaving raw, bleeding wounds. "Oh my God!" Rebecca gasped, instinctively pulling Lily closer to her side. But Lily was already moving forward, her small frame pushing past her mother's protective grasp with surprising strength. "She's hurt, Mom! She's really hurt!" Michael quickly intercepted his daughter, kneeling down to grip her shoulders. "Lily, wait. Wild horses can be dangerous, especially when they're injured and scared. Let me approach her first." "She's not wild anymore, Dad," Lily responded, her voice thick with emotion but strangely calm. "Someone did this to her. She needs to know we're not like them." The Mustang's dark eyes reflected the flashlight beam, shining with a mixture of fear and exhaustion. When another peal of thunder cracked overhead, she tried to rear back, only to be cruelly restrained by the chain. Her panicked whinny transformed into a groan of pain as the metal dug deeper into her wounded neck. Michael approached slowly, talking in low, soothing tones. "Easy, girl. We're not going to hurt you." The mare's nostrils flared, taking in his scent as she pawed nervously at the ground, her body tensed for flight. But the chain held her fast, leaving angry red marks with each desperate movement. Rebecca had pulled out her phone and was already dialing, cursing softly as the signal fluctuated in the storm. "I'm trying to reach Dr. Mason," she informed Michael, referring to the local veterinarian who had helped them when they'd found them. "Injured owl. But the service keeps cutting out." Lily stood perfectly still, rain streaming down her face, mixing with the tears that had begun to fall freely. "Who would do this, Daddy?" she whispered, her voice barely audible above the storm. "Why would someone hurt her and leave her alone?" Michael had no answer that would make sense to a 7-year-old whose heart broke at the sight of even the smallest creature in pain. The truth, that there were people in the world capable of extraordinary cruelty, was not something he wanted his daughter to understand just yet. Instead, he focused on the immediate need. "Rebecca, we need bolt cutters from the shed, and blankets, as many as you can carry." Rebecca nodded, quickly relaying their location and situation to Dr. Mason's emergency line before hanging up. "He'll be here as soon as he can, but it might be an hour with these roads. I'll get the supplies." As Rebecca hurried back toward the house, Michael turned to find Lily had somehow edged closer to the Mustang, now standing just beyond the reach of the mare's front hooves. Before he could call her back, he witnessed something remarkable. Lily was singing, a soft, sweet lullaby that Michael recognized as the same one Rebecca sang to her during thunderstorms when Lily was younger and afraid of the noise. The child's voice, pure and unwavering, seemed to cut through the chaos of the storm, creating a bubble of calm around her and the frightened animal. To Michael's astonishment, the Mustang's frantic movements gradually stilled. Her ears, which had been pinned back in fear and pain, slowly relaxed forward, focusing on the small human before her. Though still trembling, the wild panic in her eyes began to subside. "She's listening, Daddy," Lily whispered between verses, not breaking eye contact with the mare. "She knows we're trying to help." Michael wanted to pull his daughter back to safety, but something in the tableau before him, the majestic, wounded creature and the tiny human with rainwater dripping from her curls, made him hesitate. There was a connection forming, fragile, as morning mist, but somehow tangible in the rain-soaked air. Scout, who had been keeping a respectful distance, crept forward to sit at Lily's side, no longer barking but maintaining a protective stance. The dog's presence seemed to further reassure the Mustang, who lowered her head slightly, the tension in her powerful shoulders easing by degrees. Rebecca returned, her arms laden with blankets and a first-aid kit balanced precariously on top. Michael took the bolt cutters she'd tucked under her arm and approached the tree, examining the chain and lock. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "This wasn't done today," he observed grimly, noting the rust that had formed on parts of the chain, despite the relatively recent wounds on the horse's neck. "She's been struggling against this for days, maybe longer." The implications: that they might have walked their property countless times, while this animal suffered just out of sight, left a bitter taste in his mouth. The lock was industrial grade, designed to withstand force and weather. Michael positioned the bolt cutters and applied pressure, the muscles in his arms straining against the resistant metal. After several attempts, accompanied by muttered curses that thankfully were masked by the storm, the lock finally gave way. With a sharp crack, the chain slackened, and Michael carefully began to unwind it from around the tree. The mare shifted anxiously as she felt the pressure change, but Lily's continuous soft singing seemed to keep her from bolting. "Easy now," Michael murmured, moving with deliberate slowness. Almost there. When the final link pulled free from the tree, the Mustang took a startled step backward, suddenly aware of her partial freedom. The chain still hung from her neck, but she was no longer tethered to the oak. "Don't remove the rest yet," Rebecca, who cautioned. "Dr. Mason said we should leave that for him. The wounds might start bleeding worse if we take it off incorrectly." Michael nodded, setting down the chain's end and backing away slowly. "What now? We can't exactly lead her to the barn." "We bring the shelter to her," Rebecca replied, already unfurling the largest blanket. "Dr. Mason said to try to keep her dry and warm until he gets here." Working together, Michael and Rebecca fashioned a makeshift shelter using branches from the oak and the blankets they'd brought. All the while, Lily maintained her vigil, her singing occasionally interrupted by soft words of reassurance directed. "At the Mustang, you're safe now," she promised the mare. "No one's going to hurt you again. My name is Lily, and that's my mom and dad. We live in the house over there, and you can stay with us until your baby comes." The simple certainty in Lily's voice made Rebecca's eyes well with tears. Her daughter's compassion had always been her most beautiful quality, but witnessing it, directed at this magnificent wounded creature in such dire circumstances, made her heart swell with both pride and ache. As they worked to secure the last corner of the makeshift shelter, the wind suddenly shifted, carrying with it a new sound, the distant rumble of an engine. Headlights appeared on the winding driveway that led to their property, bobbing and weaving through the curtain of rain. "That must be Dr. Mason," Michael said, relief evident in his voice. But as the vehicle drew closer, the engine sound registered as unfamiliar. Not the quiet purr of the veterinarian's modern SUV, but the growling idle of something older and heavier. The headlights revealed a mud-splattered pickup truck that none of the Parkers recognized. The truck came to a stop about 50 yards from the tree, its high beams illuminating the scene in harsh white light that made the Mustang flinch and retreat as far as her injuries would allow. The driver's door opened, and a figure emerged, silhouetted against the headlights. "That's yours?" a deep voice called out, gesturing toward the Mustang. The man's tone was casual, almost friendly, but something in it raised Michael's hackles. Instantly, "We found her chained to our tree," Michael replied cautiously, stepping between the stranger and his family. "She's injured and pregnant. We've called the vet." The man approached unhurriedly, seemingly unbothered by the rain that soaked through his canvas jacket. As he came into clearer view, Michael took in his appearance, tall and broad-shouldered, with a weathered face, obscured by a thick beard. He might have been anywhere from 40 to 60, his actual age hidden beneath layers of sun damage and deep-set lines. "Name's Wade Thornton," the man said, extending a hand that Michael reluctantly shook. "I've been tracking that mare for 3 days now. She's part of a conservation project I'm running over in Blackwater County." Something in Thornton's explanation rang false to Michael, though he couldn't immediately place why. The man wore no uniform or identification that would suggest official wildlife management. "She was chained to our tree," Rebecca repeated, her voice sharper than Michael's had been. "With a padlock. That doesn't sound like any conservation method I've ever heard of." Thornton's smile didn't reach his eyes, which remained fixed on the Mustang with an expression that looked more like calculation than concern. "These wild ones can be tricky to handle. Sometimes you got to use methods that seem harsh to keep them from hurting themselves or running off before proper transport arrives." Lily, who had been silent during this exchange, suddenly spoke up, her voice small but clear. "You hurt her. She has cuts all over her neck from your chain." Thornton's gaze shifted to Lily, noticing her for the first time, and something cold flickered across his features before the affable mask returned. "Kid's got quite an imagination, don't she? Look, I appreciate you folks trying to help, but this is official business. I'll take it from here." He took a step toward the Mustang, and Scout immediately began to growl, the dog's hackles rising as he placed himself between Thornton and Lily. Michael felt a surge of protectiveness that mirrored his dog's reaction. "I think we'll wait for Dr. Mason to arrive and assess her condition," he said firmly. "If you're with a legitimate conservation program, you won't mind providing some identification and contact information for verification." The friendly demeanor slipped further as Thornton's jaw tightened. "Listen, that horse is valuable breeding stock. I don't have time to stand around in this goddamn rain arguing with—" He was interrupted by the distinctive sound of tires on gravel as a second vehicle approached. This one instantly recognizable as Dr. Mason's white SUV with the Valley Veterinary Services logo emblazoned on its side. Relief washed over Rebecca's face as the veterinarian's vehicle came to a stop beside Thornton's truck. Dr. Harrison Mason emerged quickly, medical bag in hand, his tall frame hunched against the rain as he hurried toward them. "Rebecca, Michael," he greeted them with a nod before his attention was captured by the Mustang. "Oh, my God!" he breathed, taking in the animal's condition. His experienced eyes immediately assessed the severity of her wounds and the advanced state of her pregnancy. "And who might you be?" he asked Thornton, his usually friendly tone edged with suspicion. Wade Thornton, Blackwater Wildlife Management. The man replied smoothly, "Just trying to recover our escaped mare." Dr. Mason's grey eyebrows shot up. "Blackwater doesn't have a wildlife management program," he stated flatly. "I've lived in this region my entire life and serve on the county's conservation board. So I suggest you try again." The tension that followed was palpable, broken only by a soft whimper from the Mustang as another contraction visibly rippled across her swollen belly. "She's starting labor," Dr. Mason announced, all attention returning to the immediate crisis. "Whatever dispute you folks are having will have to wait. This mare needs urgent medical attention." Wade Thornton's face darkened, his hand drifting toward his jacket pocket in a motion that set off alarm bells in Michael's mind. But before the situation could escalate further, the unmistakable sound of a police siren wailed in the distance, growing steadily louder. "That would be Sheriff Callahan," Dr. Mason remarked casually, though his eyes remained fixed on Thornton. "I took the liberty of calling him on my way over when Rebecca mentioned a chained horse, standard procedure for suspected animal abuse." Thornton's expression shifted rapidly, calculation replacing anger as he weighed his options. After a moment of tense silence, he backed toward his truck. "This isn't over," he stated flatly. "That mare is mine by right. You'll be hearing from me." As he climbed into his vehicle and the engine roared to life, Lily stepped forward, her small face set in a determination that seemed far beyond her years. "She was never yours," the child called out, her voice carrying clearly despite the rain and wind. "She belongs to the wild, and now she belongs to her baby." Thornton's truck peeled away down the driveway, mud spraying from beneath its tires, as it disappeared into the stormy night, just as the red and blue lights of the sheriff's cruiser became visible through the trees. The pregnant Mustang let out a long, low sound, not quite a whinny, more like a sigh, and slowly, cautiously, lowered herself to the ground beneath the makeshift shelter. Her dark eyes, now focused entirely on Lily, held a depth of exhaustion and pain that spoke volumes. But there was something else there too, something that Michael, in all his years photographing wildlife, had rarely witnessed in a wild animal: trust. Dr. Mason was already kneeling beside the mare, his experienced hands moving with gentle efficiency, as he began to assess her condition. "This is going to be a long night," he warned the Parkers. "She's in labor, but she's also severely dehydrated and malnourished. The combination makes for a dangerous birth." Lily settled on the wet ground next to the Mustang's head, seemingly oblivious to the rain that still found its way through their improvised shelter. With a tenderness that brought tears to Rebecca's eyes, the 7-year-old began to stroke the mare's mud-caked mane, resuming her soft, comforting song. As Sheriff Callahan's cruiser pulled up and the first serious contractions began to rack the Mustang's battered body, the storm that had brought them all together continued to rage across Bridger Valley. But beneath the ancient oak, a different kind of storm was brewing, one that would challenge a community, test a family's resolve, and ultimately redefine what it meant to fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. The pregnant Mustang, her spirit unbroken despite the cruelty she had endured, closed her eyes and leaned ever so slightly into the touch of the child who had heard her cry for help through the tempest. And in that simple gesture, a bond was formed that would change everything that followed. Sheriff Dale Callahan stepped out of his cruiser, his tall frame silhouetted momentarily against the headlights before he ducked his head against the rain, and made his way toward the makeshift shelter. Despite 23 years in law enforcement, the sight that greeted him beneath the ancient oak stopped him in his tracks. "Sweet heaven," he muttered, taking in the scene, the pregnant Mustang lying on her side, the deep lacerations around her neck still oozing blood despite Dr. Mason's preliminary treatment, and the small red-haired girl kneeling by the horse's head, whispering reassurances as if the wild animal could understand every word. Michael Parker moved to meet the sheriff, extending a hand. "Thank you for coming so quickly." I'm Michael Parker. We bought the old Henderson place 3 months ago. Sheriff Callahan nodded, his weathered face grim as he surveyed the situation. Dale Callahan. Harrison called it in, said we might have a case of severe animal abuse on our hands. His gaze shifted to the retreating taillights of Wade Thornton's truck, now barely visible through the curtain of rain. Is the suspect leaving? He called himself Wade Thornton, Rebecca explained, joining the conversation. Claimed to be from Blackwater Wildlife Management, but Dr. Mason said no such organization exists. Thornton, the sheriff repeated, his expression darkening. We've had run-ins with him before. Nothing that stuck, but there have been rumors about illegal horse trading across county lines. A pained whiny from the Mustang drew everyone's attention back to the immediate crisis. Dr. Mason was working methodically, his experienced hands moving with practiced precision as he administered fluids through an IV line he'd managed to establish. In the mare's neck. How is she? Sheriff Callahan asked, kneeling beside the veterinarian. Harrison Mason shook his head, his usually cheerful face set in lines of concern. Not good, Dale. Severe dehydration, malnutrition, infected wounds from the chain, and she's in active labor. In a healthy horse, I'd be optimistic, but she's been through hell. He lowered his voice, glancing at Lily, who remained focused entirely on comforting Mustang. Honestly, I'm not sure if both she and the foal will make. The sheriff's jaw tightened. What can we do? I need to get her to my clinic, Doctor, Mason replied, but moving her in this condition, especially in this weather, he trailed off, the impossibility of the situation evident in his tone. Michael ran a hand through his rain-soaked hair. What about bringing your equipment here? We have a barn about 100 yards from the house. It's not fancy, but it's dry and clean. Dr. Mason considered this. That could work. We'd need to make a travois to transport her. She's too weak to walk that distance. I've got some canvas tarps and timber in my cruiser, Sheriff Callahan offered. Part of the emergency kit for landslides. As the men began to formulate a plan, Rebecca noticed her daughter's unusually silent focus. Lily hadn't moved from the Mustang's side, her small hand continuing its gentle rhythmic stroking of the mare's neck just above where the cruel chain had left its mark. Lily, Rebecca called softly, come over here while the men work, sweetheart. Lily shook her head without looking up. I can't, Mom. I promised her I wouldn't leave. There was something in her daughter's voice, a certainty beyond her years, that gave Rebecca pause. She moved closer, crouching beside Lily beneath the makeshift shelter. What do you mean you promised her? Lily finally looked up, her green eyes solemn in her pale face. She told me her name is Spirit. She's been running her whole life, and she's very tired now. She wants her baby to be born somewhere safe. Rebecca felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain. Lily had always had an unusual connection with animals, but this was different. Honey, horses can't talk. Not with words, Lily agreed matter-of-factly, but they can still tell you things if you really listen. She returned her attention to the Mustang, whose breathing had become increasingly labored. She's scared. The bad men will find her baby. They've taken others before. Before Rebecca could process this disturbing statement, Sheriff Callahan and Michael returned, carrying between them a makeshift stretcher fashioned from tarpaulin and branches. We'll need to move quickly, Dr. Mason instructed. The contractions are getting stronger and closer together. With careful coordination, the adults positioned the stretcher alongside the Mustang. Moving 1,000-pound horse, even one weakened by starvation and injury, was no small task. The mare's eyes rolled white with fear as they began to shift. Wait, Lily cried out. She's too scared. Let me tell her what's happening. The adults exchanged glances, but something in Lily's conviction made them pause. She leaned close to the Mustang's ear, speaking in low, soothing tones that mixed explanation with reassurance. To everyone's amazement, the wild horse's panic seemed to subside, her breathing steadying as Lily continued her gentle monologue. She's ready now. Lily announced finally, standing but keeping one hand on the Mustang's neck. "But I have to stay with her the whole way." "All right," Dr. Mason agreed, recognizing that the child's presence had a remarkably calming effect on the horse. "But you stay at her head, away from her hooves. Understood?" Lily nodded solemnly. What followed was a grueling journey through the dark storm. Michael and Sheriff Callahan bearing most of the weight, while Dr. Mason monitored the mare's condition and Rebecca lit the way with flashlights. Lily walked alongside, maintaining constant contact and a stream of reassuring whispers that somehow seemed to keep the frightened animal from struggling despite the pain of movement. The barn, when they finally reached it, was a modest structure that the Parkers had been gradually renovating since their arrival. Currently empty of livestock, its fresh straw and sturdy walls offered welcome shelter from the elements. Michael quickly connected the generator they kept for power outages, flooding the space with warm light. As they settled the Mustang onto a thick bed of straw in the largest stall, Dr. Mason immediately resumed his medical intervention, unpacking additional supplies from the bag he'd brought from his vehicle. "Her water's broken," he announced, his tone urgent. "Birth is imminent. Rebecca, I'll need all the clean towels you can find. Michael, there's a portable ultrasound in my vehicle." "Blue." "Case, front seat." Sheriff Callahan stepped back, giving the veterinarian space to work. "I should call this in. Get some deputies out looking for Thornton," he said, pulling out his radio. "This level of animal abuse is a felony in Montana." As the adults bustled around with purpose, Lily remained a fixed point of calm beside the Mustang's head. The horse's sides heaved with exertion, her body instinctively preparing for the birth despite her weakened state. Every few minutes, a stronger contraction would cause her to groan, a sound so human in its pain that it brought tears to Rebecca's eyes as she returned with an armful of towels. "She's going to need a name," Lily said quietly, looking up at her mother. "I've been calling her Spirit in my head because that's what she feels like. Is that okay?" Rebecca knelt beside her daughter, brushing a strand of damp hair from her forehead. "I think Spirit is a perfect name." Dr. Mason, overhearing this exchange, smiled despite the gravity of the situation. "Well, Spirit it is then, and she's going to need all of hers for what's coming next." The next hour passed in a blur of tense activity. Spirit's labor progressed rapidly, too rapidly, according to Dr. Mason's concerned murmurs to Sheriff Callahan. The Mustang's weakened condition complicated what should have been a natural process, and the veterinarian found himself fighting not just for a successful birth, but for the mare's survival. Throughout it all, Lily remained unwavering in her vigil, speaking softly to Spirit during contractions and singing during the brief respites. The connection between the child and the wild horse had become something tangible in the barn's close air, a bridge of trust that defied explanation. "She needs some water," Lily announced suddenly. "She's really thirsty." Dr. Mason, focused on positioning the emerging foal, nodded without looking up. "There's a bucket over there, but don't let her drink too much at once." Michael fetched the water, watching in amazement as his daughter guided the bucket to Spirit's muzzle with a confidence that belied her 7 years. The Mustang drank gratefully, her eyes never leaving Lily's face. "She says thank you," Lily reported seriously, "and she wants us to know her baby will be special." Under different circumstances, such a statement might have elicited gentle amusement from the adults. But there was something in the barn's atmosphere, charged with pain, hope, and an inexplicable communion between child and horse, that made Lily's words feel prophetic rather than childish. "I'm sure it will be," Michael replied, his voice thick, with an emotion he couldn't quite name. Just then, Spirit let out a deeper groan, her body tensing with the strongest contraction yet. Dr. Mason's movements became more urgent. "This is it," he announced. "The foal is coming, I can see the forelegs." What followed was a moment of collective breath-holding as nature took its course. Despite her exhaustion and injuries, Spirit's powerful body knew what to do, responding to ancient instincts that transcended her current suffering. With one final monumental effort, she delivered her foal into the waiting hands of Dr. Mason, who immediately began clearing the newborn's airways and rubbing it vigorously with clean towels. "It's a filly," he announced, his professional demeanor briefly giving way to wonder. "And she's unlike any Mustang foal I've ever seen." The tiny horse, slick with birth fluids but rapidly drying under Dr. Mason's ministrations, was indeed remarkable. Though her legs were the spindly, uncertain limbs of any newborn foal, her coat, visible even through the dampness, was a striking palomino, with unusual white markings that seemed to form a starburst pattern on her chest. But most striking were her eyes, already alert and searching, a clear, almost luminous blue that was exceedingly rare in horses. "She's looking for you, Lily," Dr. Mason said softly. "Most foals take a while to focus, but she seems to know exactly what she's searching for." As if confirming his observation, the newborn filly struggled to her feet with surprising determination, wobbling toward Lily with an intentness that left even the experienced veterinarian speechless. Lily's hand extended automatically, and the foal pressed her muzzle into the child's palm in a gesture that seemed almost like recognition. "Hello, Star," Lily whispered. "I've been waiting to meet you too." The moment was broken by a sudden, alarming change in Spirit. The Mustang's breathing had become shallow and rapid, her sides heaving with effort that had nothing to do with labor. "She's crashing," Dr. Mason said sharply, moving back to the mother's side. The birth was too much for her system in this condition. He quickly administered an injection from his medical kit, his movements efficient but tinged with urgency. "Her heart rate is dropping." The blood loss combined with her prior condition, he broke off, focused entirely on his desperate medical intervention. Lily's face crumpled with sudden understanding. "No," she breathed, her small hand finding Spirit's muzzle. "You can't go. Now, your baby needs you." The newborn filly, as if sensing the crisis, pressed closer to her mother, her uncertain legs trembling with the effort of standing. She made a soft, questioning sound, the first vocalization of her young life, Spirit's eyes, dulling with approaching unconsciousness, fixed on her foal with unmistakable recognition. Then, with what seemed like tremendous effort, she shifted, her gaze to Lily's tear-streaked face. "She wants me to promise something," Lily said, her voice breaking. "She wants me to keep Star safe from the bad men. She says Star is the last of her kind." Rebecca moved to comfort her daughter, but Sheriff Callahan gently restrained her. "Let her finish," he murmured. "Whatever's happening here, it's important." Lily nodded, as if responding to words only she could hear. "I promise," she said firmly, tears flowing freely now. "I'll protect her, always." Something like peace settled over Spirit's features. Her breathing, which had been increasingly labored, steadied momentarily. She made a soft, nickering sound to her foal, who moved closer in response, and then, with a final gentle exhale, the light faded from her eyes. "She's gone," Dr. Mason confirmed quietly, after a moment of respectful silence. Her heart gave out. The barn fell silent except for the continuing storm outside and the soft, confused whinnies of the newborn filly who had just lost her mother. The tiny horse nudged at Spirit's still form, her distress evident in every movement of her small body. Lily's grief, raw and unfiltered, broke the silence. Her sobs filled the barn, the sound of a child encountering death's finality for perhaps the first time. But even in her sorrow, she didn't forget her promise. Her arms wrapped protectively around the filly's neck, offering comfort even as she herself was overwhelmed. Rebecca moved to embrace her daughter, her own eyes wet with tears. "Oh, Lily," she whispered. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart." Michael stood. Nearby, his photographer's eye unconsciously capturing the tableau in his memory, his wife and daughter embracing the orphaned foal beside the still form of the Mustang who had fought so hard to deliver her final gift to the world. The image, tragic yet somehow transcendent, would stay with him forever. Sheriff Callahan removed his hat, a gesture of respect that spoke volumes about the man behind the badge. "You folks did everything you could," he said gruffly, "more than most would have." Dr. Mason began the somber task of covering Spirit's body with a clean blanket, his movements gentle with the dignity afforded to a valiant fighter. "I've never seen anything quite like this," he admitted. "The bond between your daughter and these horses, it's remarkable." The newborn filly, seemingly understanding that her mother was beyond reach, pressed closer to Lily, her improbable blue eyes fixed on the child's face with an intelligence that seemed beyond her minutes of life. "What happens now?" Michael asked, the practical question breaking through the emotional weight of the moment. "The foal can't survive without her mother," Dr. Mason considered this. "She'll need to be bottle-fed with a specialized formula. It's intensive care, every 2 hours around the clock for the first few weeks. I can take her to my clinic, or—" "No," Lily said firmly, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "I promised Spirit I'd keep Star safe. She has to stay with us." The adults exchanged glances, a wordless conversation passing between them about the practicality of such an arrangement. But before any objections could be voiced, Sheriff Callahan's radio crackled to life. "Sheriff, this is Deputy Martinez. We've got a situation at the old Blackwater Ranch. You're gonna want to see this." Callahan stepped away to respond, his voice lowered but still audible in the barn's confined space. The conversation was brief but clearly disturbing, based on the deepening lines in the sheriff's face as he returned to the group. "That was my deputy," he explained grimly. "They found Thornton's operation. It's bigger than we thought. Looks like he's been stealing Mustangs from federal land for years, running some kind of illegal breeding program, selling the foals to foreign buyers." His gaze fell on the orphaned filly, especially ones with unusual characteristics. The implications hung heavy in the air. Whatever made Star unique, her coloring, those strange blue eyes, had apparently made her mother a target for Thornton's illegal enterprise. "There's more," Callahan continued reluctantly. "They found documentation at his property. Spirit wasn't just any Mustang. According to Thornton's records, she was the last confirmed direct descendant of a legendary Mustang bloodline that goes back to the original Spanish horses brought to America. Her DNA is apparently worth a fortune to certain collectors and breeders." Lily's arms tightened protectively around the filly. "That's why she was so scared they'd find Star. She knew they'd never stop looking." Dr. Mason looked thoughtful. "That actually explains some of her physical characteristics. The Spanish Mustangs had distinctive conformation, and those blue eyes in the foal could be a recessive trait from that ancient bloodline." He shook his head in wonder. "If that's true, this little one might be genetically irreplaceable, which means Thornton will come back for her," Michael said, the realization dawning with chilling clarity. "Even if you arrest him, there could be others involved." Sheriff Callahan nodded grimly. "That's likely. Operations like this don't usually run on one man alone. Until we unravel the whole network, the foal could be at risk." "Then we'll protect her," Lily declared with the absolute certainty only a child could muster. "That's what I promised." The days following Spirit's death and Star's birth transformed the Parker household in ways none of them could have anticipated. Their modest ranch home, once a quiet retreat from the bustle of city life, now operated on the frenzied schedule of a neonatal intensive care unit. The morning after the storm, Michael converted part of their barn into a proper nursery for the orphaned foal. He installed heat lamps to maintain a constant temperature, created a soft bedding area with specialized padding recommended by Dr. Mason, and set up a small desk where they could prepare Star's formula and keep detailed records of her feeding schedule. Lily, despite her young age, threw herself into Star's care with a dedication that astonished even her parents. She memorized the complicated formula recipe, insisted on learning how to sterilize the special bottles Dr. Mason had provided, and created a precise chart to track Star's weight and development. For a child who sometimes forgot to brush her teeth without reminders, the transformation was remarkable. "She's not just taking care of Star," Rebecca observed to Michael on the third night, as they watched Lily sitting in the straw beside the sleeping foal, reading aloud from Black Beauty in a soft, soothing voice. "It's like she's channeling something beyond herself." Michael nodded, his photographer's eye capturing the scene, his daughter's copper hair catching the golden glow of the heat lamps, the impossibly delicate curve of the foal's neck as she slept trustingly against Lily's knee. "I keep thinking about what she said that night, about spirit telling her things." He hesitated, aware of how it sounded. "I've always believed Lily had a special way with animals, but this is different." Rebecca, ever the pragmatist, would normally have offered a rational explanation, but the events of the past few days had shaken her certainty. She'd witnessed moments between Lily and Star that defied conventional understanding, the way the foal would become restless minutes before Lily arrived for a feeding, as if sensing her approach from a distance. The manner in which Star responded to Lily's whispered instructions with a comprehension that seemed impossible in an animal so young. "Whatever it is," Rebecca said finally, "it's helping Star survive, and that's what matters right now." Feedings every 2 hours around the clock took a toll on the entire family. They established a rotation, with Rebecca taking the late evening shift, Michael handling the middle of the night, and Lily eagerly claiming the early morning and daytime feedings. Even with this system, exhaustion began to settle over the household, like a heavy blanket. Dr. Mason visited daily at first, then every other day, as Star began to stabilize. His initial cautious prognosis: orphaned foals, especially Mustangs, have challenging survival rates, gradually gave way to guarded optimism. By the end of the first week, he was shaking his head in wonder at Star's progress. "I've never seen anything like it," he admitted during his 8th-day examination. "She's gaining weight at twice the expected rate, her muscle tone is excellent, and her eyes—" He paused, studying the unusual crystalline blue of Star's gaze. "They're not clouding or changing color as I'd expect in a newborn foal. They're remaining this remarkable blue." "Is that bad?" Lily asked anxiously, her hand automatically moving to stroke Star's neck in a gesture that had become second nature. "Not bad," Dr. Mason assured her. "Just unusual, like everything else about this little one." He straightened up, closing his medical bag. "You're doing an extraordinary job, Lily. I have clients with years of horse breeding experience who couldn't manage an orphaned foal this effectively." Lily beamed at the praise, but deflected it with a simplicity that touched Rebecca's heart. "I'm just keeping my promise to the spirit," she said. "Star's doing all the hard work." Sheriff Callahan visited regularly as well, though his updates weren't always as positive. The investigation into Wade Thornton's illegal Mustang operation had uncovered disturbing evidence of a widespread network. Thornton himself had disappeared the night of the storm, evading the deputies who'd been sent to his property. "We found 15 other Mustangs at his compound," the sheriff reported grimly during one visit. "All mares, all in various stages of pregnancy or recently foaled. The conditions were—" He glanced at Lily and amended whatever he'd been about to say. "Not good. We've transferred them to a rehabilitation facility in Helena." "Any sign of Thornton?" Michael asked, keeping his voice casual, though his concern was evident. "Sheriff." Callahan shook his head. "Not yet, but we've got alerts out across 3 states. He won't get far." He hesitated, then added, "The federal agents are particularly interested in Spirit's case. They've confirmed through testing that she was indeed part of that rare Spanish bloodline, which makes Star here possibly the last of her kind." This revelation, while confirming what Spirit had somehow communicated to Lily, added a weight of responsibility that settled heavily over the Parker family. Star wasn't just an orphaned foal they'd rescued. She was a living link to America's equine heritage, a genetic treasure whose protection now fell to them. The deputy patrols around their property continued, a constant reminder of the potential threat Thornton and his associates posed. Michael installed additional security cameras and motion sensors, and Rebecca began carrying her cell phone even on the short walk between house and barn. Despite these precautions, life gradually found a new rhythm. Star grew stronger daily, her wobbly legs becoming more confident, her personality emerging in delightful ways. She was curious about everything, following Lily around the barn with an almost dog-like devotion, investigating buckets and brushes and feed sacks with her velvety muzzle. Most remarkably, she demonstrated an intelligence that even Dr. Mason acknowledged was extraordinary. By the end of her 2nd week, she recognized her name, responded to simple verbal commands, and had developed what appeared to be a rudimentary understanding of the routine of the household. "She knows when it's school time," Lily explained to her mother one morning as she gathered her backpack for the first time since Star's birth. The local elementary school had allowed Lily a compassionate absence to care for the orphaned foal. But now it was time to return. "I told her I'll be back at 3:15 for her afternoon feeding, and she understands." Rebecca, who had arranged to work from the barn that day to monitor Star, smiled indulgently. "I'm sure she'll be fine, sweetheart. I'll keep her company." But to Rebecca's amazement, Star did seem to understand. The foal remained calm throughout the morning, accepting a bottle from Rebecca's hands with polite cooperation, rather than the enthusiastic bonding she showed with Lily. But as the afternoon wore on, Star became increasingly alert, positioning herself near the barn door with her blue eyes fixed on the driveway. At exactly 3:10, 5 minutes before Lily's school bus was due, Star began to whine softly, her ears pricked forward in anticipation. And when Lily burst through the barn door at 3:17, backpack still on and cheeks flushed with excitement, the foal's greeting was so joyful, so unmistakably affectionate, that Rebecca found herself blinking back unexpected tears. "See?" Lily said simply, dropping to her knees to accept Star's nuzzling. She knows. As the days stretched into weeks, Star continued to thrive under the Parker family's care. Her coat developed a lustrous sheen, the unusual white starburst pattern on her chest becoming more pronounced as her baby fuzz gave way to adult hair. Her legs grew longer, her body more proportioned, and her movements more graceful. By the 1-month mark, Dr. Mason pronounced her out of the danger zone for orphaned foals. "She's not just surviving," he told the Parkers during his checkup. "She's flourishing. You've done what many professionals would consider impossible." The credit belonged largely to Lily, whose devotion to Star had never wavered despite the return of school routines and the gradual normalization of their household schedule. The bond between child and foal had only deepened with time, evolving into something that visitors to the ranch often commented on with a mixture of wonder and disbelief. "It's like they're having conversations," Sheriff Callahan remarked one afternoon, watching Lily and Star in the small paddock Michael had constructed beside the barn. The child would whisper something, and the foal would respond with a specific movement or softly vocalized sound, creating the uncanny impression of an actual dialogue. Michael, who had been documenting Star's growth through his photography, had accumulated hundreds of images that captured this unusual relationship. Many showed Lily reading to the foal, their faces close together as if sharing secrets. Others caught them in moments of play, Star prancing around Lily in what appeared to be a game with understood rules, or both of them still and attentive, watching a butterfly or deer at the forest's edge. "I've been thinking of compiling these into a book," Michael admitted to Rebecca one evening, scrolling through the images on his computer. "Not just because they're remarkable photographs, but because I think there's something important happening here, something worth sharing." Rebecca, looking over his shoulder at a particularly striking image of Lily and Star silhouetted against a Montana sunset, couldn't disagree. Whatever was developing between their daughter and the orphaned Mustang transcended ordinary human-animal bonds. It spoke to something more fundamental, a kind of interspecies communication that hinted at possibilities most adults had learned to dismiss. The peaceful rhythm of Star's first month with the Parkers was shattered on a crisp autumn morning. In early October, Michael had taken Scout for an early hike, and Rebecca was in the kitchen preparing Lily's lunch for school. Lily herself was in the barn for Star's morning feeding, a routine that had shifted to 3 times daily as the foal grew. The sound of tires on gravel was Rebecca's first indication of a visitor. Glancing out the kitchen window, she expected to see Dr. Mason's familiar white SUV, or perhaps Sheriff Callahan's cruiser. Instead, an unfamiliar black pickup truck was making its way. Up their driveway, a flicker of unease passed through her. While they occasionally had unexpected visitors, local ranchers curious about the orphaned Mustang they'd heard about through community gossip, or delivery drivers with packages, something about this vehicle triggered a warning instinct. Rebecca reached for her phone, intending to text Michael, when movement from the barn caught her eye. Lily had emerged, clearly also alerted by the approaching vehicle. But instead of heading toward the house as Rebecca expected, her daughter turned and ran back into the barn with unusual urgency. The truck pulled to a stop in the circular gravel area between house and barn. 2 men emerged, neither familiar. To Rebecca, the driver was tall and lean, with a weathered face partially hidden behind mirrored sunglasses. His companion was shorter but powerfully built, with a shaved head and the hard-muscled look of someone accustomed to physical labor. Rebecca hesitated only briefly before hitting the emergency speed dial on her phone, a precaution Sheriff Callahan had recommended. Then she stepped onto the porch, deliberately positioning herself between the strangers and the path to the barn. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" she called out, keeping her tone neutral despite the anxiety coursing through her. The taller man approached, removing his sunglasses to reveal pale eyes that assessed Rebecca with calculated interest. "Morning, ma'am. Name's Ray Harlan. This here's my associate, Jack Mercer. We're representatives of Frontier Equine Genetics." He reached into his jacket and produced a business card, which he extended toward Rebecca. She didn't move to take it. "What can I do for you, Mr. Harlan?" If her coolness offended him, he didn't show it. His smile remained fixed and professional. "We understand you've recently come into possession of a Mustang foal with some unusual characteristics. Our company specializes in preserving rare equine bloodlines through our breeding program, and we'd like to discuss acquiring the animal." The careful phrasing, "come into possession" rather than "rescued," and the clinical reference to Star as the animal, immediately heightened Rebecca's suspicion. She crossed her arms, remaining at the top of the porch steps. "I'm afraid you've been misinformed. We're not selling or discussing acquisition of any horses today or in the future." Harlan's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Perhaps I didn't make myself clear. We're prepared to offer substantial compensation. Frontier Equine Genetics serves some very exclusive clients who value genetic rarity. Your Mustang foal represents a unique opportunity to preserve a vanishing bloodline." "The answer is still no," Rebecca replied firmly. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to attend to." The shorter man, Mercer, who had been silently surveying the property during this exchange, suddenly spoke. "The barn's that way, Ray." He nodded toward the structure where Rebecca knew Lily was currently with Star. "Want me to take a look while you chat with the lady?" "That won't be necessary," Rebecca said sharply. "This is private property. Unless you'd like me to call the sheriff, I suggest you both return to your vehicle." Harlan's facade of professional courtesy slipped slightly. "Mrs. Parker," Rebecca supplied, deliberately not correcting his assumption that she was married. Michael's absence suddenly felt acutely concerning. "Mrs. Parker," Harlan continued, "I don't think you understand the significance of what you're dealing with. That foal isn't just any Mustang. Its mother was the last documented pure descendant of the Coronado bloodline. The genetic material alone is worth hundreds of thousands to the right collectors. The specific knowledge of Spirit's lineage, combined with the barely veiled financial proposition, connected the final dots in Rebecca's mind. These men weren't legitimate genetic researchers or preservationists. They were almost certainly part of Wade Thornton's network, perhaps even sent by Thornton himself to reclaim what he considered his property. Just as this realization crystallized, Rebecca's phone vibrated in her pocket once, twice, 3 times. Sheriff Callahan's office acknowledged her emergency alert. Help would be coming, but the question was whether it would arrive in time. Her immediate concern was keeping these men away from Lily and Star until either Michael returned or the sheriff's deputies arrived. She needed to stall. "I appreciate your interest in conservation," she said, injecting her voice with a warmth she didn't feel. "But we've been working with federal wildlife authorities and the Bureau of Land Management on a protected species program for the foal. I'm not at liberty to discuss details, but I can have them contact your organization if you'd like to leave." "Your information," Harlan's expression darkened. "Federal involvement? That wasn't part of our information." Mercer had begun to edge toward the barn, his movement casual but purposeful. Rebecca's heart rate accelerated. She was about to abandon her position on the porch to physically block his path when a sound from the barn stopped everyone in their tracks. The barn door had opened, and Lily stood in the entrance. But she wasn't alone. Beside her, head held, high and blue eyes unnervingly direct, stood Star. At just over a month old, the foal was still small by horse standards, but there was nothing fragile about her posture. She stood with a presence that seemed to expand beyond her physical size, her gaze fixed unwaveringly on the 2 strangers. "They're not here to help, Mom," Lily called out, her young voice carrying clearly across the yard. "Star says they smell like the men who hurt Spirit." The simplicity of the statement, delivered with a child's direct honesty, created a moment of profound stillness. Even Mercer, who'd been edging toward the barn, froze in place. Rebecca seized the opportunity. "As you can see, gentlemen, we're well aware of who you really represent. Sheriff Callahan and the federal authorities have been notified of your presence. I suggest you leave while that's still an option." For a tense moment, it seemed the men might ignore this warning. Harlan exchanged a quick glance with Mercer, some unspoken communication passing between them. Then the sound of an approaching vehicle, tires on the gravel road that led to the ranch, broke the standoff. "This isn't over," Harlan said quietly, all pretense of professional courtesy abandoned. "That foal doesn't belong here, playing pet with some kid. Thornton will get what's his." The threat hung in the air as the 2 men returned to their truck with deliberate unhurriedness. As they drove away, they passed Michael's SUV coming in the opposite direction, Scout's black and white head visible in the passenger window. Rebecca sagged against the porch railing, the adrenaline that had sustained her during the confrontation suddenly ebbing. But her relief was short-lived, as she realized Lily was now walking toward her across the yard, Star following close behind, like an unusually attentive dog. "Lily!" Rebecca called out, suddenly fearful again. "Take Star back to the barn quickly." But Lily continued her approach, her small face set in lines of determination that reminded Rebecca forcefully of Michael. "It's okay, Mom," she called back. "Star says we need to stay together now. The bad men know where we are." Michael had pulled up to the house and was rapidly exiting his vehicle, Scout bounding ahead of him. His expression as he took in the scene, Rebecca on the porch, Lily and Star in the yard, reflected immediate understanding that something serious had happened. "What's going on?" he demanded, joining Rebecca on the porch. "I just passed a truck, leaving our property. The driver stared at me down, like he wanted to start something." Before Rebecca could explain, the sound of sirens announced the arrival of Sheriff Callahan's deputies. 2 cruisers pulled into the driveway, lights flashing, but sirens cutting off as they approached the house. The next hour was a blur of activity. Deputies took statements from Rebecca about the visitors, while Sheriff Callahan, who arrived shortly after his men, listened with growing concern. Michael reviewed the security camera footage he'd installed, which had captured clear images of both men and their vehicle. "Harlan and Mercer," Sheriff Callahan confirmed grimly after seeing the footage, "known associates of Thornton. They've got records for everything from illegal trafficking of exotic animals to assault. These aren't just opportunistic rustlers, they're organized professionals." Throughout all of this, Lily remained remarkably calm, sitting on the porch, steps with Star beside her. The foal, normally confined to the barn or paddock, seemed unusually comfortable in this new environment. Her attention divided between vigilant scanning of the surrounding area and gentle nuzzling of Lily's arm. When the initial flurry of official documentation was complete, Sheriff Callahan approached Lily directly, crouching down to meet her at eye level, a gesture of respect that didn't escape Rebecca's notice. "Lily," he said gently, "you said something earlier that I'd like to understand better. You told your mom that Star said these men smell like the ones who hurt Spirit. Can you tell me more about that?" Many adults might have dismissed such a statement as childish imagination, but Sheriff Callahan's expression held nothing but serious inquiry. Lily seemed to recognize this, responding with equal seriousness. "Star remembers smells from before she was born," she explained matter-of-factly. "Spirit could smell these men when they came to check on her while she was chained to the tree. They weren't always mean to her. Sometimes they brought food and water, but they were the ones who put the chain on her neck and took her away from her herd." She stroked Star's forelock gently. "Star says there were 5 men altogether who worked with the main bad man." Sheriff Callahan absorbed this information without visible skepticism. "And the main bad man, would that be the one who came during the storm? Wade Thornton?" Lily nodded. "Star says he was the boss. The others did what he told them to." The sheriff exchanged a glance with Michael and Rebecca, a look that acknowledged the strangeness of taking investigative leads from a child's conversations with a horse, while simultaneously recognizing that the information aligned with what they already knew about Thornton's operation. "Well," he said finally, standing up, "I appreciate you sharing that, Lily. You and Star have been very helpful." As the law enforcement presence gradually withdrew, with promises of increased patrols and explicit instructions to call immediately if the men returned, the Parker family gathered in their living room to process the morning's events. Star, in an unprecedented extension of her normal boundaries, had followed Lily into the house and now stood quietly beside the couch, her blue eyes moving between the family members as if following their conversation. "We need to consider our options," Michael said, voicing the concern that had been building since the confrontation. "These people now know exactly where Star is, and they've made it clear they'll be back. Rebecca nodded, her face tight with worry. Sheriff Callahan suggested we could temporarily relocate Star to a secure facility in Helena, the same one housing the other rescued Mustangs from Thornton's compound. No, Lily's response was immediate and vehement. We can't send her away. I promised Spirit I'd keep her safe myself. Michael knelt beside his daughter, choosing his words carefully. Lily, sometimes keeping a promise means doing what's safest, even if it's not what we'd prefer. The facility in Helena has security guards and other protections we can't provide here. But they don't know Star like I do, Lily insisted. They won't understand what she needs or what she's trying to tell them. Her eyes filled with tears, but there was resolve behind them. Please, Dad, Mom, we can't break our promise to the Spirit. Rebecca and Michael exchanged a look, a silent communication honed through years of partnership. The decision before them wasn't just about physical safety. It was about honoring the extraordinary bond that had formed between their daughter and this remarkable young horse, a connection that defied conventional explanation but was undeniably real. Star, as if sensing the pivotal nature of the moment, moved closer to Lily and lowered her head to press her muzzle gently against the child's cheek, a gesture so deliberate, so tender, that it brought tears to Rebecca's eyes. Maybe there's a third option, Michael said slowly, one that doesn't involve separation or remaining vulnerable here. Both Lily and Rebecca looked at him questioningly. We go together, he explained. I have that photographer's retreat coming, up at Sawtooth Lodge, the one in the mountains where I was scheduled to teach next month. It's remote, accessible only by private road, and they have facilities for horses. I could call in some favors, move up my reservation. Hope bloomed on Lily's face. Like a family vacation with Star? More like a temporary relocation, Rebecca corrected, though she was already mentally calculating what would be involved in such a move. But yes, we would all stay together, including Star. The plan began to take shape as they discussed it, a strategic retreat to give law enforcement time to apprehend Thornton and dismantle his network, while keeping Star safe and the family united. It wasn't without complications, but with each challenge they identified, a solution emerged. By evening, the decision was made. The Parker family would temporarily relocate to Sawtooth Lodge, taking Star with them. Sheriff Callahan, when informed, approved the plan and offered to provide a deputy escort for the journey. As dusk settled over the ranch, Lily sat on the porch steps with Star beside her, both of them gazing out at the Montana landscape that had become their home. The foal's unusual blue eyes reflected the fading light, giving her an almost otherworldly appearance. We'll come back, Lily promised, her arm draped over Star's neck. And when we do, the bad men will be gone, and you'll be safe forever. Star nickered softly in response, a sound that to anyone observing might have seemed remarkably like agreement. The bond between them, forged in the crucible of birth and loss, strengthened by daily acts of care and trust, had evolved into something that transcended ordinary human-animal relationships. It was a partnership, a communion of spirits, one that would face its greatest test in the days to come, as forces beyond their control continued to converge around the last descendant of a legendary bloodline, and the child who had promised to protect her at all costs. The dawn broke crisp and clear as the Parker family prepared for their journey to Sawtooth Lodge. Michael had spent much of the night making arrangements, securing the specialized trailer they would need for Star, coordinating with Sheriff Callahan for the escort, and contacting the lodge to prepare for their early arrival. Rebecca moved efficiently through the house, packing essentials while simultaneously coordinating with her online teaching supervisor for emergency leave. The kitchen table was covered with maps, hastily scribbled lists, and the specialized formula supplies that Star would need during their journey. Lily, despite her parents' insistence that she try to sleep, had been too anxious about the upcoming trip to rest properly. She sat cross-legged on her bed, carefully packing her backpack with items she deemed essential. Star's favorite brush, the worn copy of Black Beauty she'd been reading to the foal, and a small lock of Spirit's name that Dr. Mason had thoughtfully preserved for her. "Ready for the big adventure?" Michael asked, appearing in her doorway with Scout at his heels. Lily nodded solemnly. Star's excited but nervous. She's never been in a trailer before. Michael had long since stopped questioning how his daughter knew such things about the foal's emotional state. The evidence of their unusual connection had become too consistent to dismiss. "Dr. Mason will be here soon to help with that part," he assured her. "He knows exactly how to make her comfortable for the trip." Outside, the specialized horse trailer that Michael had rented from a neighboring ranch arrived, pulled by Sheriff Callahan himself rather than one of his deputies. "Thought I'd handle this personally," he explained, as he helped Michael secure the trailer to their SUV. "Got word this morning that Thornton's been spotted across the state line in Idaho. If he's moving west, that could mean he's heard about your plans somehow." The news added urgency to their preparations. By the time Dr. Mason arrived, the family was nearly ready to depart. The veterinarian had brought additional sedatives for Star, though he hoped they wouldn't be necessary. "The less stress we can manage, the better," he explained, examining the trailer's setup with a critical eye. "Young horses can be unpredictable in transport, especially one that's never been trained before." Everyone's concern about Star's reaction to the trailer proved largely unfounded, however. When Lily led the foal from the barn, speaking softly in what Rebecca had come to think of as their private language, Star approached the strange metal contraption with cautious curiosity rather than fear. "She understands it's to keep her safe," Lily explained, standing beside the open trailer ramp. "I told her it's like a moving cave that will take us to the mountains." Dr. Mason raised an eyebrow at this, but made no comment beyond, "Well, whatever you told her seems to be working." With minimal coaxing, Star allowed herself to be led up the ramp and secured inside the trailer. Dr. Mason showed Lily how to check the safety harnesses and explained the ventilation system that would keep fresh air circulating during their journey. "You've done an amazing job with her," he told Lily as they completed the final safety checks. "I've worked with professionally trained horses that wouldn't load this calmly." Sheriff Callahan's cruiser would lead their small convoy, with the Parker's SUV and attached trailer following, and a deputy's vehicle bringing up the rear. The formation was designed to provide maximum security while attracting minimum attention. Just a family outing with their horse, nothing to warrant special notice. As they prepared for departure, Rebecca found herself taking one last look at their home, the modest ranch house they'd worked so hard to make their own, the barn where so much had happened in such a short time, the ancient oak tree visible in the distance where they'd first found Spirit on that stormy night. A strange feeling washed over her, not quite foreboding, but a certainty that when they returned, nothing would be quite the same. "We'll be back before you know it," Michael assured her, mistaking her expression for homesickness. "This is just temporary," Rebecca nodded, forcing a smile. "I know, it's the right decision." The journey to Sawtooth Lodge would take approximately 4 hours, cutting through some of Montana's most spectacular scenery. Under different circumstances, it might have been a pleasant family excursion, but with the shadow of Thornton's threats hanging over them, every mile marker passed felt like a small victory in their escape. Star remained remarkably calm throughout the initial part of the journey. Lily insisted on riding in the back seat, where she could see through the small observation window into the trailer, maintaining what she called a visual connection with the foal. They were nearly 2 hours into their journey, navigating a winding mountain road that cut through national forest land, when Sheriff Callahan's brake lights suddenly flashed red. The convoy slowed, then pulled onto a scenic overlook that provided a wide view of the valley below. "What's happening?" Rebecca asked, anxiety sharpening her voice as Sheriff Callahan approached their vehicle. "Probably nothing," he said, though. His expression suggested otherwise. "Got a call from dispatch. There's a black pickup that's been reported twice behind us since we left the main highway. Could be a coincidence, but I'd rather be cautious." From her position in the back seat, Lily stiffened. "Star's scared," she reported. "She can smell something she doesn't like." Sheriff Callahan's radio crackled with the voice of his deputy, still positioned at the rear of their convoy. "Sheriff, that truck just pulled onto the overlook. 2 male occupants." Michael craned his neck to see past Sheriff Callahan. Coming slowly up the curved entrance to the overlook was a black pickup that looked disturbingly similar to the one that had visited their ranch the previous day. "That's them," Rebecca confirmed, her hand instinctively reaching for Lily in the back seat. "Harlan and Mercer, stay in your vehicle," Sheriff Callahan instructed firmly. "Deputy Ellis and I will handle this." As the sheriff returned to his cruiser, Michael reached beneath his seat and removed a small object that Rebecca recognized with shock as a handgun. "Michael," she whispered, "since when do you—" "Since men who chain pregnant horses to trees started threatening our family," he replied grimly, checking the weapon before returning it to its concealed position. "Let's hope Sheriff Callahan can resolve this, but I'm not taking chances with you and Lily." The confrontation that followed unfolded like a scene from an old western. Sheriff Callahan and Deputy Ellis positioned themselves between the Parkers' vehicles and the approaching truck. Words were exchanged, too distant to hear clearly, but the body language spoke volumes. Harlan gesturing expansively, Sheriff Callahan's posture remaining rigid and official. From the trailer, Star's distressed whinny pierced the tense standoff. "She knows they're here for her," Lily said, her voice small but steady. "She says we need to keep moving." Whether by coincidence or some deeper intuition, Sheriff Callahan seemed to reach the same conclusion. After a final exchange with Harlan, he returned to Parker's vehicle. "We're rolling out now," he instructed. "They claim they're just sightseeing, but I don't believe it for a second. I've called ahead for additional units to meet us at the county line." As their convoy pulled back onto the mountain road, Rebecca glanced in the side mirror to see the black pickup remaining at the overlook, Harlan watching their departure with calculating eyes. "Will they follow us?" she asked. Sheriff Callahan's expression was grim. "Probably, but they won't make a move with law enforcement present. We just need to get you safely to the lodge." As they continued their journey deeper into the mountains, the knowledge that they were being hunted settled over the Parker family. But alongside the fear was a steely resolve, especially visible in Lily's determined expression as she maintained her vigil at the trailer window, protecting the extraordinary foal that fate had entrusted to her care. Sawtooth Lodge emerged from the pines like something from a postcard. A sprawling timber structure nestled against the backdrop of jagged mountain peaks. Under different circumstances, the Parker family might have paused to appreciate its rustic beauty, but their arrival was marked by vigilance rather than vacation excitement. The lodge's owner, Eleanor Whitman, greeted them personally. A formidable woman in her 60s with silver hair and the weathered complexion of someone who'd spent decades outdoors, she'd been a friend of Michael's since his early days as a wildlife photographer. "You'll be safe here," she assured them, leading the way toward a private cabin separated from the main lodge by a small meadow. "We've got limited access roads, security cameras, and most importantly," she gestured to the mountains looming behind them, "nature's own barriers all around." The cabin itself was surprisingly spacious, with a main living area, 2 bedrooms, and a covered porch that overlooked a small private paddock, clearly the accommodations Eleanor reserved for guests traveling with horses. The stalls through. "There," Eleanor indicated a connecting door that led to a small but well-maintained stable. "I've stocked it with fresh hay and filled the water trough. Does your filly have any special needs?" "More than you might expect," Michael replied with a tired smile. "But we've brought everything she requires." Sheriff Callahan and Deputy Ellis helped unload their belongings while Michael and Lily focused on getting Star settled. The foal, after nearly 4 hours in the trailer, was understandably eager to stretch her legs, prancing into the paddock with renewed energy once she was released. "She likes it here," Lily reported, watching Star investigate her new surroundings. "She says the air tastes cleaner." Eleanor, overhearing this, raised an eyebrow but made no comment beyond, "Smart little filly you've got there. Once everything was unloaded and Star was settled, Sheriff Callahan pulled Michael and Rebecca aside for a final briefing. "I've spoken with the local county sheriff. They'll have patrols check this area twice daily. Eleanor has my direct number, and I've instructed my deputies to consider any call from this location with the highest priority." He hesitated, then added, "We're still tracking Thornton's movements, but he's gone to ground. These types usually have multiple false identities and resources we don't know about." After the sheriff's departure, the family began the process of settling into their temporary home. Rebecca organized their supplies, while Michael checked the cabin's security features. Lily, predictably, spent most of her time with Star, helping the foal adjust to her new environment. That evening, as dusk painted the mountains in deepening shades of purple, Eleanor returned with a basket of home-cooked food and additional supplies. "Thought you might be too tired to cook," she explained, setting the basket on the kitchen counter. Her gaze drifted to the window where Lily could be seen in the paddock, Star's graceful form never far from her side. Remarkable bond, those two. "I have," Rebecca followed her gaze. "It goes beyond anything I can explain. Sometimes I wonder if they're actually communicating." Eleanor finished when Rebecca trailed off. "I wouldn't be so quick to dismiss the possibility. There's a lot we don't understand about how different species connect." Eleanor stayed for dinner, and as they ate, she shared information about the area that took on greater significance given their circumstances. "The locals around here are a tight-knit community," she explained. "Newcomers get noticed. If your Thornton or his men come snooping, word will spread fast. That works in your favor." But there was more to her knowledge than just local geography and social dynamics. As the conversation progressed, it became clear that Eleanor had an unusual depth of understanding about wild horses in general and Spanish Mustang bloodlines in particular. "My late husband was a wildlife biologist specializing in America's wild horse populations," she explained when Michael commented on her expertise. "He documented the decline of the pure Spanish bloodlines for 30 years before his death." "Then you understand why Star is so significant," Rebecca said. Eleanor nodded solemnly. "If she's truly from the Coronado line, she may be carrying genetic markers that were thought to be extinct in the wild population. That makes her priceless, not just in monetary terms, but historically and biologically." After dinner, while Lily was preparing Star's evening bottle, Eleanor showed Michael and Rebecca a small home office adjacent to her private quarters in the main lodge. The walls were covered with maps tracking wild horse populations and photographs, documenting various herds. On one shelf sat a row of leather-bound journals, Thomas's life work, Eleanor explained, running her fingers along the spines. His research on Spanish Mustang preservation was never formally published, but it's all here. She pulled out one volume, opening to a page marked with a faded ribbon, "Including information about the Coronado bloodline that your spirit apparently carried." The page showed detailed sketches of distinctive markings and conformation traits associated with the rare lineage, many of which matched Spirit's appearance as captured in Michael's photographs. Most striking was a drawing of a foal with a star-shaped chest marking nearly identical to Star's. Thomas called them ghost horses, Eleanor said softly, the last echoes of the original Spanish bloodlines becoming more diluted with each generation. He predicted they would vanish completely within 50 years, unless deliberate preservation efforts were made. The implications of this new information settled over Michael and Rebecca. Star wasn't merely a rescued orphan or even just a rare genetic specimen. She was potentially one of the last links to a living historical legacy that predated the nation itself. As they returned to their cabin, the weight of responsibility felt heavier than ever. Through the window they could see Lily sitting on a hay bale in the stable, Star's head resting contentedly in her lap as she read aloud from her book. The scene's tranquility belied the gathering complications around them, complications that extended far beyond one man's illegal operation to touch on questions of preservation, heritage, and what it truly meant to protect a vanishing piece of America's living history. The first week at Sawtooth Lodge passed without incident. Star adapted quickly to her new environment, thriving under Lily's constant attention. Michael began his scheduled photography workshops, though he always returned to the cabin by dusk, unwilling to leave his family alone for extended periods. Rebecca converted the cabin's small dining area into a makeshift office, continuing her online teaching while keeping a watchful eye on the surrounding forest. Their fragile peace shattered on the 8th day. Michael was reviewing photographs with a small group of workshop participants when Eleanor appeared at the lodge's main hall doorway, her face tense with urgency. She beckoned him outside, away. From curious ears, there's a man at the general store in town asking questions about new arrivals, she reported. Specifically, a family with a young horse. Carson at the store called me immediately. He knows everyone's business around here. Michael's stomach tightened. Description: tall, weathered beard, driving a green SUV with Idaho plates. She met his eyes directly. Not the men who followed you here, but he fits the description of Wade Thornton you gave me. Michael pulled out his phone to call Sheriff Callahan, but Eleanor stopped him. Already done. But the sheriff's office is an hour away. Local deputies checking it out, but I thought you should know immediately. Michael thanked her, made hurried excuses to his workshop participants, and headed back to the family's cabin. As he approached, he saw Lily in the paddock with Star, both seemingly oblivious to any potential danger. Rebecca sat on the porch, laptop open, but her attention clearly focused on her daughter and the foal. "We need to get inside," Michael said, without preamble. "Thornton's been spotted in town." Rebecca's expression shifted instantly, from relaxed to alert. She called to Lily, who responded to the urgency in her mother's voice by immediately leading Star into the stable. Inside the cabin, Michael quickly explained the situation while checking that the doors and windows were secure. "Couldn't it be a coincidence?" Rebecca asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Michael shook his head. He was specifically asking about a family with a young horse. "That's not a coincidence." Lily, who had been listening silently, suddenly spoke up. "Star's not surprised. She says they have ways of finding her." This cryptic statement hung in the air as Michael's phone rang, Sheriff Callahan returning his call. The news wasn't good. The local deputy had found no sign of the man matching Thornton's description. He'd apparently paid cash at the general store, bought supplies consistent with camping, and left town, heading toward the network of forest roads that surrounded the lodge property. "He's not alone," Lily said after Michael relayed this information. "Star says there are others. She can feel them." Michael and Rebecca exchanged concerned glances. Their daughter's unusual connection with Star had proven accurate too many times to dismiss, regardless of how improbable her statements sometimes sounded. "I'm going to talk to Eleanor about increasing security," Michael decided. "Rebecca, keep Lily and Star in the stable. It's more defensible than the cabin if—" He didn't finish the sentence, unwilling to verbalize the worst-case scenario. In front of Lily, Eleanor took the news with the calm efficiency that seemed to characterize her response to crises. She immediately activated the lodge's internal alert system, restricting guest movements to the main buildings and deploying the small security team she maintained primarily for wildlife encounters. Thomas insisted on security protocols after. "We had a situation with wildlife traffickers years ago," she explained. "They were after endangered lynx, not horses, but the principle is the same." As dusk approached, the tension at Sawtooth Lodge was palpable. Eleanor's security staff reported no unusual sightings, but the forest surrounding the property was vast, offering countless places for someone with wilderness experience to remain hidden while observing the lodge. In the stable, Lily sat on a hay bale beside Star, speaking softly to the foal in what had become their private language. Rebecca, watching from the doorway, was struck again by the unusual maturity her daughter displayed in this crisis, a calmness that seemed to transfer to Star, who remained alert but not panicked. "She's telling me about her family," Lily explained when she noticed her mother watching, "about the herd Spirit came from and how they've been running from bad men for generations." Rebecca moved to sit beside her daughter. "What else does she tell you?" Lily's face grew serious. "That Wade Thornton isn't just after her. He wants to own all the ghost horses because they're special. He thinks if he controls them, he controls their magic." "Magic," Rebecca prompted gently. "That's what Star calls it. Not like fairy tale magic, but something else." Lily struggled to find the words. "Like a connection to the land and the old times. She says the ghost horses remember things from before people came with metal and fire." The conversation was interrupted by Michael's return. His expression told Rebecca everything she needed to know before he spoke. "Security spotted someone on the ridge above the north pasture. They're sending a team to investigate, but it's getting dark fast." The family spent a tense night in the cabin, taking turns keeping watch. Michael's handgun lay within reach, though he prayed he wouldn't need it. Star remained in the stable, unusually quiet except for occasional soft nickering that seemed directed at Lily, even through the cabin walls. Morning brought no relief. Eleanor reported that her security team had found evidence of multiple people camping in the forest surrounding the property, at least 3 sites, strategically positioned to observe different approaches to the lodge. "They're surrounding us," Michael realized, "cutting off escape routes." The truth was unavoidable. Wade Thornton had found them, and he was closing in. The sanctuary they'd thought secure was now effectively under siege. By mid-morning, Sawtooth Lodge had transformed from a peaceful retreat into a fortress on high alert. Eleanor had evacuated most guests under the pretense of a wildlife management operation, leaving only essential staff and the Parker family. Sheriff Callahan was en route with a team of deputies, but their arrival was still hours away. "We need a better defensive position," Michael insisted, studying the property map Eleanor had spread across the main lodge's reception desk. "The cabin's too isolated." Eleanor nodded grimly. "The main lodge has better security. Stone walls, fewer entry points, backup generator. We should move your family here immediately." The real challenge was relocating Star. The foal had grown, increasingly agitated as morning progressed, sensing the tension around her. Transporting her across the open ground between the cabin's stable and the lodge's larger barn would leave them exposed. "I can keep her calm," Lily assured them. "She trusts me." No one questioned this assertion. Lily's bond with Star had become an accepted fact, even among Eleanor's staff, who had witnessed the unusual communion between child and horse. As they prepared for the move, Eleanor received an unexpected call. Her expression shifted from concern to cautious relief as she listened. That was Dr. Catherine Blackwood, she reported after hanging up. She's a wildlife veterinarian and federal consultant on endangered species. Thomas worked with her for years. She's been tracking the Coronado bloodline independently and got word from Sheriff Callahan about our situation. She's 20 minutes out with a federal marshal. The news injected a ray of hope into their tense vigil. Professional help beyond local law enforcement, and specifically an expert who understood Star's biological significance, could change the dynamics of their standoff with Thornton. Dr. Blackwood arrived exactly as promised, her government-issued SUV followed by a marshal's vehicle. She emerged with purposeful energy, a tall, athletic woman in her 40s with close-cropped dark hair and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to crisis situations. "Eleanor," she greeted with a quick embrace. "Wish it were under better circumstances." Introductions were made rapidly as Marshal Davis, a stern-faced man with military precision in his movements, conferred with Eleanor's security team about the property's vulnerabilities. Dr. Blackwood's focus immediately turned to Star. "May I see the foal?" Lily, predictably protective, studied the veterinarian with solemn assessment before nodding her approval. She led Dr. Blackwood to the stable, the adults following close behind. Star's reaction to the newcomer was remarkable. The foal approached without hesitation, stretching her neck to sniff Dr. Blackwood's outstretched hand. A soft nicker escaped her, a sound that Lily recognized as acceptance. "She says you smell like the people who used to help her ancestors," Lily translated, "before the bad men came." If Dr. Blackwood found this statement strange, she didn't show it. She examined Star with gentle efficiency, paying particular attention to the distinctive white starburst marking on her chest and the unusual blue of her eyes. "Remarkable preservation of phenotypic traits," she murmured. The genetic testing results from Spirit's tissue samples were correct. "This foal carries markers we thought were lost decades ago." She turned to the Parkers, her expression grave. "What you've done, rescuing Spirit, saving this foal, is more significant than you may realize. The Coronado lineage isn't just rare. It's possibly the purest connection to the original Spanish horses brought to America in the 1500s. Most Spanish Mustangs today carry less than 30% of the original genetic material. Spirit was tested at 87%, which makes Star potentially the most genetically intact specimen we've documented in the wild population." Marshal Davis rejoined them, his conversation with the security team complete. "The property is secure for now, but we've confirmed at least 4 individuals in the surrounding forest. Local deputies have intercepted one man matching Wade Thornton's description on the Eastern Access Road, but he had documentation identifying him as someone else. Samuel Wells, wildlife photographer." "False identification," Michael said grimly, "but at least we know it's him." "He was released before they could verify," Marshal Davis continued, "but we have a description of his vehicle and have alerted all checkpoints. He won't get far." Dr. Blackwood's expression remained troubled. "Thornton isn't just a small-time rustler. My office has been tracking his operation for years. He specializes in rare bloodlines, horses with specific genetic traits that wealthy private collectors will pay fortunes to own. The Coronado line has been his white whale. There's evidence he's been systematically capturing and breeding from the remnant population for over a decade." "That matches what Star has been telling Lily," Rebecca said, earning a surprised look from the marshal, but an understanding nod from Dr. Blackwood. "The foal needs to be moved to a secure federal facility," Dr. Blackwood stated. "We have a specialized conservation center in Wyoming dedicated to preserving endangered equine genetics. It's completely secure, with round-the-clock protection." Lily's face fell. "But she needs to stay with me. I promised the Spirit." Dr. Blackwood knelt to meet Lily at eye level. "I understand your connection with Star. It's extraordinary, something I've rarely seen in my career. But Thornton won't stop coming for her. The facility I'm describing isn't just a pen or holding area. It's 7,000 acres of protected land where she can run free with other rescued Mustangs while still receiving protection. Could we visit? Her? Lily asked, her voice small but resolute. Not just visit, Dr. Blackwood replied. I'm proposing you come too, at least initially. Star will need time to adjust, and your presence would ease that transition. A crash from outside interrupted their conversation, the unmistakable sound of glass breaking, followed by shouts from Eleanor's security team. Marshal Davis's hand moved instantly to his sidearm. We're out of time for discussion, he said grimly. They're making their move. Chaos erupted across Sawtooth Lodge. Marshal Davis coordinated with Eleanor's security team through his radio, positioning them to defend key access points. Michael protectively gathered Rebecca and Lily close, while Dr. Blackwood focused on calming Star, who had begun to pace anxiously in her stall. 3 men approaching from the North Trail, crackled the marshal's radio, armed with what appeared to be tranquilizer rifles. The implications were clear. Thornton wanted Star alive and unharmed, her genetic value intact. We need to move now, Marshal Davis instructed. The reinforcements are still 30 minutes out. We can't wait. Eleanor guided them toward a concealed service corridor that connected the stable to the main lodge's basement. Thomas had this built years ago to move injured wildlife without stressing them. It's not on any public plans of the property. The tunnel was narrow but tall enough for Star to navigate with Lily's gentle guidance. They emerged into the lodge's basement, a surprisingly modern space that contrasted with the rustic appearance of the upper floors. The panic room is through. Here, Eleanor explained, leading them to what appeared to be a storage closet but opened to reveal a reinforced steel door. Another of Thomas's precautions, designed to withstand both human and natural threats. The space beyond was compact but efficiently designed with essential supplies, communication equipment, and enough room for their group, including Star. As the door sealed behind them with a reassuring thud of heavy bolts sliding into place, a series of monitors flickered to life, showing camera feeds from around the property. We're secure for now, Eleanor assured them. This room has independent ventilation, power, and communications. Even if they take the rest of the lodge, they can't get in here without specialized equipment. On the monitors, they watched the unfolding confrontation. Thornton's men had split into smaller groups, systematically searching the property. Marshal Davis and 2 security guards were engaged in a standoff near the main entrance, while other staff had positioned themselves strategically throughout the buildings. There he is, Michael said suddenly, pointing to one monitor showing a tall, bearded man directing operations from the tree line. That's Thornton. Lily, who had been whispering reassurances to Star, looked up at the screen, her face hardened with recognition. That's the man who hurt the spirit. Star remembers his voice. The radio on the control panel crackled to life. With Marshal Davis's voice, they're claiming to have legal ownership papers for the foal. Thornton's approaching under white flag to negotiate. Dr. Blackwood moved to the communication system. This is Dr. Blackwood. Do not engage. That animal is now under federal protection as part of the Endangered Equine Conservation Program. Any claim of ownership is superseded by conservation statutes. Through the monitors, they watched as this information was relayed to Thornton. His reaction was visible even on the grainy footage, a flash of anger quickly masked by calculated calm. He produced documents from inside his jacket, insisting on their validity to the marshal. He's claiming Spirit was his legally registered breeding mare, stolen from his property, Marshal Davis reported back. Says he has DNA evidence proving Star is the offspring of his registered stock. Dr. Blackwood's expression darkened. He's trying to use the legal system against us. It's a common tactic. Establish questionable ownership through falsified paperwork, then tie up protection efforts in court while continuing operations elsewhere. But we found Spirit chained to a tree on our property, Rebecca protested, clearly abandoned and abused. In his version, she escaped during transport and your family took her without reporting it to authorities, Marshal Davis replied through the radio. It's a twisted version of events, but crafted to create just enough legal ambiguity to cause problems. The ethical and legal conflict was now fully apparent. Thornton was exploiting the complexities of horse ownership laws and the gaps in wild horse protection to assert his claim over Star, a claim that, while morally bankrupt, could potentially find traction in certain courts if the evidence of abuse wasn't properly documented. What happens now? Michael asked. Dr. Blackwood's response was measured but determined. The federal protection I've initiated creates a legal shield while we gather evidence of his operations. But he knows that, which is why he's forcing the issue physically rather than through proper channels. Lily, who had been listening intently to this exchange, suddenly spoke with wisdom beyond her years. He doesn't care about papers or laws. He just wants Star because she's special, because of what she can do. What do you mean, what can she do? Dr. Blackwood asked, her attention fully on Lily now. The ghost horses aren't just rare, Lily explained, her hand resting on Star's neck. They remember things. They can find places no one else can find. Old places with special meaning. Star says that's why the bad men want them, to find something hidden long ago. This statement hung in the air, its implications both mystical and unsettling. Before anyone could question. Further, the radio crackled again with Marshal Davis's urgent voice. They're making a move on the north side. I count at least 6 men now. They've disabled 2 cameras and... His transmission cut off abruptly. On the monitors they watched as smoke began to billow from one wing of the lodge. Not a destructive fire, but tactical smoke designed to create confusion and cover movement. They're not just trying to negotiate, Eleanor realized. This is a full tactical assault. The situation had escalated beyond a simple legal dispute into something far more dangerous. Thornton wasn't just a poacher or illegal breeder. He was commanding what appeared to be a trained team executing a coordinated attack on civilian property. As they watched the monitors, the ethical questions about Star's future momentarily gave way to the immediate concern for their safety. The secure room would hold, but outside, the conflict between protection and exploitation was being fought with increasingly desperate measures. The tense hours that followed tested everyone's nerves. Through the surveillance system, they watched, as Thornton's men systematically searched the lodge, growing increasingly frustrated as they failed to locate Star or the Parker family. Sheriff Callahan's deputies finally arrived, creating a standoff that forced Thornton's team to retreat temporarily into the surrounding forest. Inside the secure room, Dr. Blackwood used the respite to contact her federal colleagues, providing updates and requesting additional support. Eleanor maintained communication with her security team, coordinating with Sheriff Callahan's deputies. Michael and Rebecca focused on keeping Lily calm, though in truth, their daughter seemed the most composed among them, sitting quietly with Star and whispering reassurances. Dr. Blackwood, having completed her calls, turned her attention to Lily. Earlier, you said something about the ghost horses finding special places. Can you tell me more about that? Lily looked to her parents, who nodded encouragingly. Star says the ghost horses remember paths that people have forgotten, old trails that lead to places where her ancestors came from, places with water even, in dry times, or safe valleys hidden in the mountains. Dr. Blackwood exchanged a significant look with Eleanor. That sounds like the Spanish cache legends Thomas researched. Eleanor nodded, her expression thoughtful. Thomas believed the original Spanish explorers used native horse intelligence to locate resource-rich areas. Horses can sense water underground and find navigable mountain passes. The theory was that certain bloodlines were specifically bred for this environmental intelligence and passed it down through generations. Starr says the ghost horses can feel the old places, Lily continued, encouraged by their interest. When they're near them, they get a special feeling, like remembering something important. Dr. Blackwood retrieved her tablet from her bag and opened a mapping application. This might explain Thornton's unusual focus on the Coronado bloodline specifically. There's a persistent legend about lost Spanish gold in this region, supposedly hidden when an expedition was attacked in the 1540s. She expanded the map to show the mountainous area surrounding Sawtooth Lodge. Historical records suggest the expedition's last known position was within 50 miles of where we're sitting right now. Academics have dismissed it as myth, but rumors persist about cached artifacts and gold. You think Thornton believes Starr can lead him to this lost treasure? Michael asked skeptically. It would explain his operational pattern, Dr. Blackwood replied. He hasn't just been breeding from the Coronado line. He's been taking the horses to specific locations and documenting their behavior. Our intelligence suggests he's mapping reaction patterns. Eleanor's expression darkened with realization. Using their genetic memory as a treasure map. The theory sounded fantastic, but explained Thornton's obsessive pursuit of Starr despite the increasing legal risks. If he believed the foal carried some inherited ability to locate a lost Spanish cache worth millions, his relentless pursuit made a twisted kind of sense. Starr says it's not about gold, Lily interjected quietly. The special place has something more important, something the old horses were protecting. Before anyone could question this cryptic statement, the radio crackled with Marshal Davis's voice, now restored. We've secured the main building. Thornton and his men have withdrawn to the forest perimeter. FBI tactical team is 20 minutes out. Relief washed over the group, though they knew the danger hadn't passed. Thornton had merely retreated, not surrendered. We should review Thomas's research, Eleanor suggested. If Thornton is using the Spanish cache legend to guide his operations, Thomas's maps might help us understand his next move. She accessed a hidden compartment in the room's wall, revealing a weathered leather portfolio. Inside were hand-drawn maps with annotations, focusing on a specific mountain range 15 miles northwest of the lodge. Thomas narrowed the potential. Cache location to this valley system, Eleanor explained, spreading the maps on the table. Based on historical accounts, geographical features mentioned in expedition journals, and unusual behavior patterns in wild horses he tracked in the area. Dr. Blackwood studied the maps intently. This overlaps with areas where Thornton has been spotted over the past 3 years. He must have reached similar conclusions independently, or stolen Thomas's research, Eleanor added grimly. We had a break-in at the lodge office 2 years ago. Nothing valuable was taken, but his files were disturbed. Michael examined the topographical details. This valley would be nearly impossible to find without knowing exactly where to look. It's shielded by rock formations that would hide it from aerial surveys. A perfect hiding place for something precious, Rebecca observed. Lily, who had been listening carefully while stroking Starr's neck, suddenly spoke. Starr says she can find it. The special place. She feels it calling to her, like her mother did. The adults exchanged glances, skepticism warring with the inexplicable evidence of Lily's connection with the foal. Even if that's true, Rebecca said gently, it's too dangerous. Thornton is still out there. That's precisely why we need to consider it, Dr. Blackwood countered, surprising everyone. If Thornton is following the same research, he'll focus on these locations regardless. Having Starr there might give us an advantage, both in understanding what he's seeking and potentially in protecting whatever historical significance this site might hold. Her logic was compelling, if unconventional. If Thornton believed Starr could lead him to the cache, and if Lily's connection with the foal truly provided insight into this inherited knowledge, they might be able to secure the site before Thornton could exploit it. "There's something else," Eleanor added quietly. "Thomas believed the cache might contain biological materials, preserved seeds or plant specimens the expedition was cataloguing. If that's true, there could be scientific value, beyond any gold or artifacts." The discussion was interrupted by an alert from the surveillance system. On the monitor, they watched as FBI vehicles began arriving, a full tactical team deploying around the lodge perimeter. "It's time to make a decision," Marshal Davis said, through the radio. "We can evacuate you safely now, or we can find what Thornton is looking for before he does," Lily finished, her young voice steady with conviction. The decision to pursue the Spanish cache location was not made lightly. After intense discussion, a compromise was reached. Dr. Blackwood would lead a small expedition to investigate the valley using Thomas's research, accompanied by federal agents. The Parker family would remain at Sawtooth Lodge under FBI protection. With Starr safely secured, Lily, predictably, objected strenuously. "Starr needs to go," she insisted. "She's the only one who can find the exact spot." "It's too dangerous," Michael maintained, his parental instinct for protection overriding all other considerations. The stalemate broke unexpectedly when Sheriff Callahan arrived with news that changed their calculations entirely. "We've received reports from ranchers throughout the valley," he explained in the command center that had been established in the lodge's main hall. "They've spotted Thornton's men at multiple locations, apparently establishing observation posts. He's mobilizing a much larger operation than we initially thought." More concerning was the sheriff's next revelation. Some of these ranchers have reported being approached by Thornton's associates with offers to purchase their land, specifically properties along the northwest ridge that would provide access to the valley system Eleanor identified. Dr. Blackwood frowned. "He's creating a perimeter, securing legal access points to control the entire search area." "And he's not working alone," Sheriff Callahan added. "We've identified financial connections to a private military contractor based in Nevada. Whatever he's seeking, he has serious backing." This information shifted the dynamics significantly. What had seemed like one man's obsessive pursuit now appeared to be a well-funded operation with strategic planning and resources that could potentially outmaneuver even federal authorities through legal property acquisitions. "The community is pushing back," Sheriff Callahan continued, offering a ray of hope. "Local ranching families go back generations here. They don't take kindly to outsiders trying to buy up strategic parcels. They're organizing, sharing information, and reporting suspicious activities." This grassroots resistance had already yielded results. 3 of Thornton's associates had been detained when they trespassed on the Bryant family ranch while attempting to survey the property. Others had been identified through a hastily created phone tree network among the scattered homesteads throughout the valley. Eleanor nodded with grim satisfaction. Montana people protect their own, and they understand the value of preserving history rather than exploiting it. The most surprising community response came from the Native American representatives from the nearby reservation. 3 tribal elders arrived at the lodge that afternoon, having heard about the situation through connections with local ranchers. "Our people have stories about the Spanish horses," explained Margaret Running Deer, the eldest of the group. "We believe certain bloodlines carried the memories of the land in their spirits. The colonizers recognized this gift but misunderstood its purpose." Margaret requested to meet Starr, a reunion facilitated carefully under the watchful eyes of security personnel. The encounter was remarkable. Starr approached the elderly woman without hesitation, lowering her head in what seemed like a gesture of respect. "The horse remembers," Margaret said simply, her weathered hand gently touching Star's white chest marking. "And so does the child," she added, looking directly at Lily with knowing eyes. This interaction catalyzed a shift in the community's engagement. What had been a scattered response to suspicious outsiders transformed into a coordinated effort to protect both the land and its history. Ranchers offered access to their properties for security patrols. Tribal members volunteered as guides. In the more remote areas, where their knowledge of the terrain was unmatched, even tourists staying in nearby towns reported sightings of Thornton's men to local authorities. This mobilization created a protective network that stretched beyond what formal law enforcement could maintain alone. The FBI tactical team commander, initially skeptical of civilian involvement, quickly recognized the value of this community intelligence network. "We're essentially getting real-time surveillance across hundreds of square miles," he acknowledged, during a strategy meeting. "That's something we couldn't achieve with our resources alone." The discussion was interrupted by an alert from the surveillance system. On the monitor, they watched as FBI vehicles began arriving, a full tactical team deploying around the lodge perimeter. "It's time to make a decision," Marshal Davis said, through the radio. "We can evacuate you safely now, or we can find what Thornton is looking for before he does," Lily finished, her young voice steady with conviction. The decision to pursue the Spanish cache location was not made lightly. After intense discussion, a compromise was reached. Dr. Blackwood would lead a small expedition to investigate the valley using Thomas's research, accompanied by federal agents. The Parker family would remain at Sawtooth Lodge under FBI protection. With Star safely secured, Lily, predictably, objected strenuously. "Star needs to go," she insisted. "She's the only one who can find the exact spot." "It's too dangerous," Michael maintained, his parental instinct for protection overriding all other considerations. The stalemate broke unexpectedly when Sheriff Callahan arrived with news that changed their calculations entirely. "We've received reports from ranchers throughout the valley," he explained in the command center that had been established in the lodge's main hall. "They've spotted Thornton's men at multiple locations, apparently establishing observation posts. He's mobilizing a much larger operation than we initially thought." More concerning was the sheriff's next revelation. Some of these ranchers have reported being approached by Thornton's associates with offers to purchase their land, specifically properties along the northwest ridge that would provide access to the valley system Eleanor identified. Dr. Blackwood frowned. "He's creating a perimeter, securing legal access points to control the entire search area." "And he's not working alone," Sheriff Callahan added. "We've identified financial connections to a private military contractor based in Nevada. Whatever he's seeking, he has serious backing." This information shifted the dynamics significantly. What had seemed like one man's obsessive pursuit now appeared to be a well-funded operation with strategic planning and resources that could potentially outmaneuver even federal authorities through legal property acquisitions. "The community is pushing back," Sheriff Callahan continued, offering a ray of hope. "Local ranching families go back generations here. They don't take kindly to outsiders trying to buy up strategic parcels. They're organizing, sharing information, and reporting suspicious activities." This grassroots resistance had already yielded results. 3 of Thornton's associates had been detained when they trespassed on the Bryant family ranch while attempting to survey the property. Others had been identified through a hastily created phone tree network among the scattered homesteads throughout the valley. Eleanor nodded with grim satisfaction. "Montana people protect their own, and they understand the value of preserving history rather than exploiting it." The most surprising community response came from the Native American representatives from the nearby reservation. 3 tribal elders arrived at the lodge that afternoon. Having heard about the situation through connections with local ranchers, our people have stories about the Spanish horses, explained Margaret Running Deer, the eldest of the group. We believe certain bloodlines carried the memories of the land in their spirits. The colonizers recognized this gift, but misunderstood its purpose. Margaret requested to meet Star, a reunion facilitated carefully under the watchful eyes of security personnel. The encounter was remarkable. Star approached the elderly woman without hesitation, lowering her head in what seemed like a gesture of respect. "The horse remembers," Margaret said simply, her weathered hand gently touching Star's white chest marking. "And so does the child," she added, looking directly at Lily with knowing eyes. This interaction catalyzed a shift in the community's engagement. What had been a scattered response to suspicious outsiders transformed into a coordinated effort to protect both the land and its history. Ranchers offered access to their properties for security patrols. Tribal members volunteered as guides. In the more remote areas, where their knowledge of the terrain was unmatched, even tourists staying in nearby towns reported sightings of Thornton's men to local authorities. This mobilization created a protective network that stretched beyond what formal law enforcement could maintain alone. The FBI tactical team commander, initially skeptical of civilian involvement, quickly recognized the value of this community intelligence network. "We're essentially getting real-time surveillance across hundreds of square miles," he acknowledged, during a strategy meeting. "That's something we couldn't achieve with our resources alone." Dr. Blackwood's expedition plans evolved to incorporate this community support. Local guides who knew the terrain intimately would accompany the federal agents. Tribal representatives offered traditional knowledge about the valley system that complemented Thomas's scientific research. Throughout these developments, Star remained unusually calm, staying close to Lily at all times. The foal's behavior, observed carefully by Dr. Blackwood, seemed to validate Lily's claims about her connection to the location they sought. "She's not anxious anymore," Lily explained. "She knows we're going to protect the special place." The expedition was scheduled for dawn the following day. A small, specialized team would attempt to locate the cache site using Thomas's maps, local knowledge, and, though few would openly admit it, whatever guidance Star might provide through her unusual bond with Lily. As final preparations were made, Rebecca found Michael standing alone on the lodge's porch, staring out at the mountains turned golden by the setting sun. "We never expected any of this," she said softly, joining him at the railing. "A simple act of kindness during a storm, and now we're in the middle of something that feels bigger than us," Michael finished. "Something that was set in motion long before that night." Their quiet reflection was interrupted by Lily's appearance in the doorway, Star somehow managing to follow her through the lodge's wide corridors, despite Eleanor's previous rules about horses remaining outside. "Star wants to show you something," Lily announced with the certainty that had become her hallmark in all matters relating to the foal. As the family watched, Star walked deliberately to the edge of the porch, facing northwest toward the distant valley. She raised her head, nostrils flared, and gave a soft, nickering call that carried across the evening air, a sound both invitation and challenge. In the distance, barely visible in the fading light, a movement caught Michael's eye. At first, he thought it was deer or elk on the hillside. Then he realized the truth. Wild horses, a small herd moving along the ridge, pausing as if in response to Star's call. "They've been watching," Lily said simply. "They're coming to help." Dawn broke, with steel-gray clouds hanging low over the mountains. The expedition team gathered in the pre-dawn darkness. Dr. Blackwood, Marshal Davis with 2 federal agents, Sheriff Callahan, 2 tribal guides led by Margaret Running Deer's grandson Jason, and against all initial objections, Lily and Star. Michael and Rebecca would accompany their daughter, having refused to be separated from her despite the potential dangers. Eleanor remained at the lodge coordinating communications while the FBI tactical team maintained perimeter security. The plan was straightforward but risky. Reach the hidden valley before Thornton could mobilize his forces, locate the cache site using the combined guidance of Thomas's research and Starr's unusual connection, and secure it for proper archaeological assessment. They traveled in a convoy of 3 specialized off-road vehicles, with Starr secured in a modified trailer designed for rough terrain. The first hour passed in tense silence as they navigated Forest Service roads still wet from overnight rain. "We need to leave the vehicles soon," Jason advised as they approached a dense tree line. "The next section can only be traversed on foot or horseback." This was the moment of truth for Starr. The young horse had never carried a rider, and though Lily insisted she was ready, the adults remained skeptical. "She knows what to do," Lily assured them as they unloaded Starr from the trailer. "Spirit taught her about carrying people before she was born." This statement, like many of Lily's declarations about Starr, defied conventional understanding, but matched the foal's behavior. Starr stood calmly as a special lightweight saddle was secured, designed by Dr. Blackwood specifically for her young frame and limited strength. "She can carry Lily's weight, but only for short distances," Dr. Blackwood cautioned. "We'll need to alternate between walking and riding." The hiking party set off with Jason and the tribal guides leading, followed by Marshal Davis and his agents. Michael kept close to Lily and Starr, while Rebecca walked alongside Dr. Blackwood, with Sheriff Callahan bringing up the rear. The terrain grew increasingly challenging as they moved deeper into the wilderness. Ancient pine forests gave way to rocky outcroppings and narrow passes that wound between towering stone walls. Without the guide's expertise, navigation would have been nearly impossible. "We're following game trails that have existed for centuries," Jason explained during a brief rest. "Our people used these same paths, as did the Spanish when they first came." After 2 hours of steady progress, they reached a hidden saddle between 2 peaks, a natural gateway not visible from either side. Beyond it, the landscape opened into a sheltered valley system, exactly as Thomas had mapped it, a series of connected meadows surrounded by protective cliffs, with a spring-fed stream winding through its center. "It's perfect," Dr. Blackwood breathed, surveying the secluded paradise. "Naturally defensible, hidden from sight with fresh water and grazing. An ideal place to cache valuable materials while waiting for reinforcements." Starr's behavior changed the moment they entered the valley. The calm, steady demeanor she'd maintained throughout the journey gave way to alert excitement. Her ears pricked forward, nostrils flared, and her pace quickened despite the difficult terrain. "She knows this place," Lily said with certainty. "Her ancestors were here." They followed Starr as she moved with increasing purpose through the valley, no longer needing guidance from Lily. The foal seemed drawn to a specific area near the base of the eastern cliff face, where a tumble of boulders created a natural alcove. As they approached, Marshal Davis suddenly raised his hand, signaling for silence. He pointed to the ridge above them, where movement was visible, human figures working their way down a barely discernible trail. "Thornton," Sheriff Callahan confirmed, through his binoculars. "With at least 6 men, they must have come in from the east side." Their advantage of surprise was lost. Worse, they were caught in the open with limited cover. Marshal Davis and his agents immediately moved to defensive positions, while Sheriff Callahan radioed for backup. "Too late for that," Dr. Blackwood said, grimly. "We need to find the cache site now before they reach us." Starr had already arrived at the boulder formation and was pouring at the ground with surprising intensity. Michael hurried to help Lily dismount, while Rebecca joined Dr. Blackwood in examining the area Starr indicated. Beneath a layer of soil and accumulated plant matter, they uncovered what appeared to be a stone slab with faded markings. Clearly, man-made and deliberately placed. "This is it," Dr. Blackwood confirmed, brushing away centuries of accumulated dirt. "Spanish colonial. This slab likely seals an underground chamber." Before they could investigate further, the first shout came from Thornton's approaching group, a command to stand down and step away from the site. Marshal Davis and his agents formed a protective perimeter around the discovery, weapons drawn but restrained by the presence of civilians. "This is federal land under archaeological protection," Marshal Davis called back. "Approaching with weapons is a felony offense." Thornton's response was chilling in its calm certainty. "This valley doesn't appear on any federal registry. According to my documentation, we're on private property. Mine. Purchased legally last night from a holding company that's owned these mineral rights since 1907. The legal maneuver was unexpected and potentially devastating. If Thornton had indeed secured legal ownership through some corporate shell game, their position could be compromised regardless of federal interest in the site. Starr, oblivious to these human complications, continued to paw at the ground beside the stone slab with increasing urgency. Lily remained by her side, stroking her neck and whispering encouragement that seemed to calm the agitated foal. As Thornton and his men closed in, the confrontation seemed inevitable. Federal authority versus questionable property claims, preservation versus exploitation, protection versus greed, all focused on whatever secret lay beneath that ancient stone marker. What happened next would be recounted differently by each witness, colored by their understanding of what was possible, but all would agree on the essential sequence. Starr suddenly reared up, her front hooves striking the stone slab with unexpected force. The ancient marker, weathered by centuries, cracked along a previously invisible seam, and from the darkness beneath, a soft blue light began to emanate, a glow that seemed to respond to Starr's presence with pulsing intensity. The ghost horse had found what generations of seekers had failed to locate, and in that moment, with enemies approaching and protectors standing firm, the true nature of the Spanish cache was about to be revealed. The blue light washed over the valley, casting everything in an ethereal glow. Thornton and his men froze in their advance, momentarily stunned by the unexpected phenomenon. Marshal Davis and Sheriff Callahan maintained their defensive positions, equally bewildered but professionally focused on the human threat. Only Lily seemed unsurprised. She knelt beside the cracked stone slab, Starr standing protectively over her as she peered into the opening. "It's beautiful," she whispered, her face illuminated by the azure radiance rising from below. Dr. Blackwood was the first to recover her scientific curiosity. She moved cautiously to join Lily, her expression shifting from shock to wonder as she examined the source of the light. "It's not electrical or chemical," she reported with hushed amazement. "It appears to be botanical." Michael and Rebecca joined them at the opening, followed by the tribal guides who showed no fear of the strange phenomenon. Within the ancient cache chamber, revealed by Starr's forceful intervention, lay not gold or jewels, but something far more extraordinary. Rows of carefully preserved ceramic vessels containing what appeared to be seeds and seedlings. These humble, botanical specimens, somehow suspended in a state between dormancy and growth, emitted the otherworldly blue glow. "Living artifacts," Dr. Blackwood breathed. "Plant species preserved for nearly 5 centuries. This is beyond unprecedented." Jason studied the chamber with reverent understanding. "Our stories speak of the lifelight, plants brought from distant shores that glowed with the spirits of their homelands. The colonizers sought to study them, but when attacked, hid them. Instead of allowing their destruction, The scientific implications were staggering. Plant specimens from the 16th century, preserved through unknown methods that had maintained some form of biological viability for centuries. Their potential, value for botanical research, medicine, and understanding historical ecosystems far outweighed any cache of gold or silver. This revelation transformed the standoff instantly. Thornton, who had been advancing with confident authority, now hesitated. Whatever he had expected, Spanish treasure, historical artifacts with monetary value, this luminescent botanical discovery clearly fell outside his expertise. "Federal agents, drop your weapons!" came a new voice from the ridge above. The FBI tactical team had arrived, having been guided by Eleanor's local contacts through alternative access points. They rapidly descended, establishing a secure perimeter around the site and cutting off Thornton's potential escape routes. With reinforcements arriving, Marshal Davis moved decisively. "Wade Thornton, you're under arrest for multiple violations of federal law, including animal cruelty, endangered species trafficking, and attempted theft of protected archaeological materials." Thornton's men, seeing their position deteriorate, began to lower their weapons. But Thornton himself made a desperate final move, lunging toward the cache opening where Lily still knelt beside Star. "If I can't have it, no one will," he shouted, pulling a small incendiary device from his jacket, the kind used for controlled burns in forestry operations. What happened next unfolded with dreamlike clarity. Star, sensing the threat to both Lily and the precious cache, reared, up to her full height, seemingly larger than her young frame should allow. Her blue eyes blazed with the same unearthly light emanating from the ancient seeds. She brought her hooves down with precision, not striking Thornton directly, but landing between him and Lily, sending vibrations through the ground that caused him to stumble backward. In that crucial moment of imbalance, Sheriff Callahan tackled Thornton to the ground, disarming him before he could activate the device. The remaining members of Thornton's team surrendered without further resistance, their employer's fanatical pursuit finally exposed as the destructive obsession it truly was. As federal agents secured the prisoners, Dr. Blackwood and the tribal representatives began the delicate process of documenting and preserving the extraordinary find. The cache contained dozens of ceramic vessels, each holding different specimens. Preliminary examination suggested they included medicinal plants recorded in Spanish expedition documents, but believed extinct, along with native species that had disappeared from the ecosystem centuries ago. "The horses weren't leading treasure hunters to gold," Dr. Blackwood explained, as she carefully catalogued the find. "They were protecting an infinitely more valuable inheritance, living botanical history that could have been lost forever." Star remained close to the cache entrance, occasionally lowering her head to the opening as if communicating with the glowing plants below. Lily stayed by her side, translating in her matter-of-fact way. "She says the seeds remember her ancestors," the child reported. "They've been waiting for the right ghost horse to find them again. That's why Spirit brought her here, so Star could finish what was started long ago." While adults might have dismissed such statements as childish imagination, the events they'd witnessed made such dismissal impossible. Something profound had occurred in this hidden valley, something that transcended standard scientific explanation. As the day progressed, a plan formed to protect both the botanical discovery and Star herself. The cache site would be secured under joint federal and tribal jurisdiction, with research access carefully controlled. Dr. Blackwood would lead the scientific team studying the preserved plants, while tribal representatives would ensure their cultural significance was honored. For Star, the resolution was equally fitting. The Wyoming Conservation Facility Dr. Blackwood had originally proposed would become her home, but with significant modifications. A special area would be established for the Coronado Lineage Preservation Program, with Lily invited to participate in Star's ongoing care and development. "She'll be free there," Dr. Blackwood assured the family, running with other Mustangs but protected from those who would exploit her heritage. "And you can visit any time. In fact, we're hoping Lily will consider being part of our youth conservation program." As evening fell over the valley, the technical teams arrived to properly secure the site. Thornton and his men were transported to federal custody, facing charges that would ensure they never again threatened wild horses or historical treasures. The Parkers gathered with Star on a small rise overlooking the cache site, now surrounded by protective equipment and respectful researchers. The foal stood between Lily and her parents, her blue eyes reflecting the lengthening shadows as the mysterious glow from the cache continued to illuminate the gathering dusk. "Did we do what Spirit wanted?" Lily asked softly, her hand resting on Star's neck. "Did we keep our promise?" Michael knelt beside his daughter, finding wisdom in simplicity. "Yes, sweetheart, I think we did exactly what she hoped we would. We protected something precious, not just Star, but a legacy that belongs to everyone." In that moment of quiet triumph, Star raised her head and gave a soft whinny that carried across the valley. From the ridge above came an answering call. The wild herd they'd glimpsed earlier, watching over their own, as they had for countless generations. The circle was complete, a promise kept, a legacy preserved, and a reminder that sometimes the most profound connections form in the unlikeliest moments, like a stormy night when a family chooses compassion over indifference and changes the course of history in ways they could never have imagined. 6 months passed like a dream. Autumn gave way to winter, which eventually surrendered to the first whispers of spring across the Wyoming plains. The Mustang Conservation Center sprawled across 7,000 acres of protected land, its modern facilities nestled respectfully into the natural landscape. Star had flourished beyond everyone's expectations. Now approaching her first birthday, she had grown into her lanky frame with remarkable grace. Her coat gleamed in the April sunshine, the distinctive white starburst on her chest more pronounced than ever, her unusual blue eyes still clear and piercing. The Parker family made the journey from Montana monthly, with Lily spending every school break at the center. Their lives had transformed in ways they never anticipated when they first moved to their rural ranch. Michael's photographs of Star and Spirit had garnered national attention, leading to a book deal documenting their extraordinary story. Rebecca had transitioned from online teaching to developing educational programs for the center, focused on connecting children with conservation efforts. But the most profound transformation was in Lily herself. The quiet, imaginative 7-year-old had blossomed into a confident young advocate for wild horse preservation. Her unique ability to connect with the Mustangs, particularly Star, had become not just accepted, but valued by the scientific and conservation teams working at the center. She understands them in ways we're still trying to quantify, Dr. Blackwood admitted to a colleague during an evaluation session. Traditional science doesn't have a framework for what we're observing, but the results speak for themselves. Indeed, the results were remarkable. Under the guidance of Dr. Blackwood and a team of geneticists, botanists, and veterinarians, Star had helped locate 3 additional Mustangs with Coronado lineage markers, distant cousins whose genetic material strengthened the preservation program. Together with careful breeding protocols and protected habitat, the once endangered bloodline now had a fighting chance at survival. The botanical discoveries from the Spanish cache had proven equally revolutionary. Several of the preserved specimens contained compounds previously unknown to modern science, with promising applications in medicine and agriculture. Research partnerships between federal agencies, tribal authorities, and universities had been established to study these plants with appropriate cultural respect and scientific rigor. Wade Thornton and his associates faced justice through the federal court system. The evidence against them, including documentation recovered from Thornton's compound, revealed an operation more extensive than initially suspected. A network that had trafficked endangered species across multiple states for decades. His conviction brought closure not just for the Parker family, but for countless animals who had suffered under his exploitation. On this particular spring morning, the center was hosting a special ceremony. Representatives from federal agencies, tribal nations, conservation organizations, and the local community gathered to officially dedicate the Coronado Preservation Area, a specially designated section of the Conservation Center focused on protecting the unique bloodline Star represented. Lily, dressed in her best jeans and a turquoise shirt, gifted by Margaret Running Deer, stood beside Star at the center of attention. The young horse, now comfortable with such gatherings, remained calm under Lily's gentle hand. Dr. Blackwood addressed the assembled guests, her typical scientific precision giving way to genuine emotion. What we celebrate today goes beyond preserving a genetic lineage, though that alone would be worthy of our efforts. We're honoring an ancient partnership between humans and horses, a relationship that has shaped our shared history and may yet guide our shared future. She gestured toward Lily and Star. Sometimes it takes a child's perspective to remind us of connections we've forgotten. And sometimes it takes extraordinary circumstances to reveal the extraordinary bonds that are possible between species. Margaret Running Deer stepped forward, her weathered hands carrying a specially crafted halter decorated with traditional beadwork and symbols. "This is not to tame or control," she explained as she presented it to Lily, "but to honor the spirit that connects you. Our people recognize when two beings share one path." Lily accepted the gift with solemn gratitude, holding it gently rather than immediately placing it on Star. The bond between them needed no physical representation. It existed in every shared glance, every moment of silent communication that continued to baffle and impress the scientists studying them. When the formal ceremony concluded and the guests dispersed to the reception area, the Parker family found a quiet moment alone with Star at the edge of the preservation area. Beyond the fence line, the Wyoming landscape stretched toward distant mountains, wild and promising. "Do you think the spirit can see what happened?" Lily asked, gazing at the horizon where a small herd of the center's Mustangs grazed freely. "Do you think she knows Star is safe?" Rebecca put her arm around her daughter's shoulders. "I believe some connections transcend what we can easily explain. The love you showed Spirit, the promise you kept, those things matter in ways we might not fully understand." Michael, who had been quietly photographing the scene, lowered his camera. "You know, when we found Spirit that night, we thought we were just helping one horse. We never imagined we were becoming part of something that had been unfolding for centuries." Star nickered softly, nudging Lily's shoulder in what had become a familiar gesture of affection. The young horse then turned toward the open fields and gave a different call, higher, more resonant, carrying across the plains like a message to distant ears. To everyone's amazement, an answering call came back from the direction of the mountains. Through binoculars, Michael could make out a small band of wild Mustangs pausing on a distant ridge, their silhouettes dark against the blue sky. "They've been watching," Lily said matter-of-factly. "They always watch over their own." Dr. Blackwood, who had approached quietly during this exchange, nodded in agreement. "We've been tracking unusual patterns in the wild herd since Star arrived. They approach closer to our boundaries than ever recorded previously. It's as if they're maintaining some form of connection." As the family watched, Star pawed at the ground with familiar intentness, the same gesture she had made at the cache site. Lily knelt beside her, placing her ear near Star's muzzle, as if listening. "To a whispered secret. She says it's time," Lily announced, standing again with newfound purpose. "Time for her to run with them for a while, to learn what only they can teach her." Dr. Blackwood raised an eyebrow. You mean supervised grazing in the external pastures? We had that scheduled for next month, but we could— No, Lily interrupted gently. She needs to join them, really join them, just for a season. The adults exchanged concerned glances. Star, though thriving in the conservation program, was still young and valuable, the cornerstone of their preservation efforts. Allowing her to run with wild herds, even temporarily, presented risks that scientific caution couldn't easily embrace. Yet the evidence of Lily and Star's special understanding had accumulated beyond dismissal. Time after time, their unconventional communications had proven accurate, their bond revealing insights that traditional methodology missed. She'll come back, Lily assured them with absolute certainty. She promised, but there are things she needs to learn from them first, things about being a ghost horse that we can't teach her. After much discussion and careful planning, a compromise was reached. Star would be fitted with a specialized tracking device and allowed limited freedom to interact with the wild herds under careful monitoring. Dr. Blackwood called it a controlled integration study. Lily simply called it keeping a promise. 3 weeks later, on a warm evening as sunset painted the Wyoming sky in brilliant orange and pink, the moment arrived. A section of specially designed fencing was temporarily opened at the preservation area's boundary. Star stood at the threshold, Lily beside her, both gazing out at the waiting grasslands. "Remember your promise," Lily whispered, her fingers gentle against Star's neck. "Come back to me when it's time." Star turned her extraordinary blue eyes to Lily one last time, a gaze so full of intelligence and affection that even the most skeptical observers fell silent. Then, with a soft nicker that sounded remarkably like reassurance, she turned and trotted toward the distant hills where the wild herd waited. The family watched as Star's graceful form grew smaller against the vast landscape, her pace increasing to a canter and finally a full gallop as she approached the waiting Mustangs. The herd accepted her without hesitation, enfolding her into their formation as they moved together toward the mountains. Lily stood watching long after Star had disappeared. From sight, her face peaceful rather than sad. When she finally turned back to her waiting parents, her expression held the wisdom that had become her hallmark. "Some promises are forever," she said simply, "like the one I made to Spirit, and the one Star just made for me." Michael knelt to embrace his daughter, finding himself moved beyond words by her unwavering faith. Rebecca joined them, the family unified by an experience that had changed them all irrevocably. As darkness settled over the conservation center, the distant sound of hoofbeats echoed across the plains, a rhythmic percussion that spoke of freedom, of wildness preserved, and of connections that defied conventional understanding. The story that began with a pregnant mare chained to a tree had transformed into something far greater, a tale of promises kept, of natural wisdom respected, and of a bond between species that reminded everyone involved of what was truly worth protecting in this world. And somewhere in the Wyoming night, a young horse with a white star on her chest and the ancient wisdom of her bloodline in her veins ran free under the endless sky, carrying forward a legacy that would continue long after this chapter ended, a living bridge between the wild and the human, between past and future, between what was lost and what might yet be found again. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.